All right, perfect. I got the topics, I got everything. Sorry. Oof. Yeah, so I guess we're going to start. Perfect. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us to this brand new episode of Hippy Dippy Recruitment. Happy to have you all here. And yeah, let's start with a little round of introduction. Present yourself, tell people where they can find you, what you're doing. Yeah, everything that you want to share. Let's start with sourcing support.
Hello, everyone. I am SourcingSupport. You can find me here on Twitch at twitch.tv/SourcingSupport. I stream on weekend mornings from roughly 7 a.m. Eastern Time until whenever I get bored or angry. And I try to foster an environment which is a little bit more chill. We talk about politics, but nothing in particular. And aside from that, I don't really do any self-promotion, so we'll leave it at that.
All right. The Splunker.
Hi, howdy. It's Splonker here. I'm from the ChanceOfFluri show, co-host. We're two of us, and we basically talk about Canadian politics. I'm Canadian. I am a very much a libertarian in my views, and the show kind of leads into like the libertarian freedom, individual personal responsibility kind of thing. But
Hey, your
we
mic's
laugh
real
about.
quiet.
Oh, really? Oh, give me a second here. Is this better? Sorry.
Yep.
Yes. Oh, okay. So yes, we are a Canadian show on YouTube. ChanceOfFluri. You can check us out. I'm just a co-host and pretty much libertarian. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to give it to ChanceOfFluri, Carl.
Yeah, so I mean, my name's Carl, but I'm the second half of ChanceOfFluri. Basically, obviously, same show, Canadian show, more libertarian leaning. I myself am an anarchist, a mutualist. So we have a couple different perspectives on the show. So it makes for an interesting dialogue if you guys ever want to join us. But other than that, I guess everything's covered there. So.
All right. Thank you for being here. HabeasHumor.
Hey, my name is Sharon, and my show is called HabeasHumor. You could call me Sharon, Habeas, whatever. And I will go ahead and as soon as I'm done talking, I'll just put my website and my links in the stream in case anyone wants to find me. I am originally Californian. I currently reside in Ohio, U.S. I do a show, like I said. It's both a podcast and a YouTube channel called HabeasHumor. It's obviously meant to be entertaining, but also kind of infotainment. I discuss legal issues a lot. I have been an attorney since 2005. And I'm also into a lot of other things. I'm into history. I'm into comedy. I do improv. I do singing. I do music. I have a lot of cats. So yeah, I'm an eclectic person. Politically, according to the Compass test, minarcho-socialist. So I just want just a little bit of that state, I guess. And straight cis woman, pronouns she, her. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everyone on the panelists. Thank you to the audience for being here. That's it.
All right. I'm going to throw it to Rose Wrist.
Am I muted or am I unmuted? Let's see. I'm unmuted. Good. Hello, everybody. My name is Roserist. I'm a progressive social democratic political content creator from Sweden. I still live in Sweden. So I typically bring a relatively more European angle on a lot of things, which is fairly unique because most of the people on these panels tend to be Americans or otherwise North Americans. Like we have a lot of Canadians on here for the moment. I am most known, I suppose, for a number of research documents I've put out over the past year. I had one about systemic racism, which the conclusion being that systemic racism is real. One about worker co-ops, where we talk about how, hey, they're cool, but we probably shouldn't mandate them as of right now. And then one about immigration in relation to Sweden, because that's all anyone ever talks about Sweden for in an international stage. And yeah, my YouTube is Rose Riz. You can find my stuff there, and I'm excited to be on this panel.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. North Countryman, how are you doing?
I'm all right. Just sorting out hang on, I'm muted. I'm I'm just fine, sorting out a whole bunch of tech issues as per usual. Wouldn't be a North Country stream without me. Am I muted?
No.
No, you're good.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I'm North Countryman. The best way to describe me is I've got like 10 years of experience in either learning politics myself or teaching it to others. So everything I'm going to say is going to be correct, but I'm going to say it in the most incoherent, poorly worded, badly presented way possible. So we'll see how this nets out. That's why I like doing these panels. Just it's a way of personal growth.
Hell yeah. Tiberius, thank you for joining us. How are you doing?
And of course, now I'm muted. It's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me, Geek. It's always a pleasure. Yeah, I'm Tiberius D. My personal politics are weird. I'm on the right, but I do have some left-wing sympathies, but I'm no centrist by any stretch of the imagination. I just kind of weird because I disagree with everybody. Anyway, as far as what I do is that I've got three forms of content. The first is geopolitical content. I'll be going over the numbers for coronavirus and all of last year's data coming up around the 1st of August. There's a lot to go through on that, but if you're interested to see what happened to the world last year, I'll be covering that in greater detail. I have Mask Off, which will be tonight at 9 p.m. EST, where you can catch me, Counterpoint, Samantha Banana, and Osiris. We'll be talking about things and everything. That doesn't usually have a set topic. We just kind of go about what's bothering us that week. And then finally, I do reviews. So if you want to hear my thoughts on Star Wars or Star Trek or, the Click movie from 2006, definitely go check that out. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate having me here. And it's going to be interesting. So SDA.
Yeah.
Hey everybody, I'm SDA or Shave Dog's Ass. I come into these panels just to try and learn something. Recently I've kind of had to refocus kind of what I'm doing in life, so I'm appreciated that I'm still having this as a part of my routines, I guess. I've been doing a lot less streaming, but generally I follow along the libertarian or minarchist or anarcho-capitalist lines in thinking, but ultimately a lot of my social goals line up with that of people all across the spectrum. I think generally I oppose people who want to use the state to get an ends to their means, and I think that discussion around policy should really focus on maximizing individual liberty and minimizing the role of the state. I think the most important topics today are like ending the drug war and criminal justice reform, investment into community tested initiatives or programs to help bolster communities that have been historically suffering, and broader access to healthcare services. So if you like just to hang out and discuss things or need to just talk about anything, come hang out on my channel. And thank you for having me on, Mr. Geek, and thank you all for being here. It's nice to see some of y'all again.
Always a pleasure to have you on. All right, let's go quickly over the rules. All right, so I'm not going to intervene in this debate. I'm just here to moderate. So when I speak, no one speaks. This has to be rule 1, basically. So it's going to go. We're gonna have 2 topics and 1 palette cleanser, which is basically a pure entertainment topic in the middle. So it's going to be first topic, palette cleanser, second topic. It's going to be opening. A big period where you can engage and closing statement. The last time you can address a topic is during the opening of the next one. After that, it's over. You have to move on. Don't interrupt during opening or closing. Basically, this is your time to speak uninterrupted. Try to make it as short as possible, like 1 minute, 2 minute max. Beside that, nothing TOS. Don't use slurs and don't misgender people. I think that will be, those are the rules. Before I start, I need to thank Danabo, who made this panel possible, basically by doing an amazing work behind the scene and everything. I have nothing to... Basically, I'm at the restaurant right now. I just had to sit down, put my chair in front of my stream, and he's taking care of the booking and everything. He's doing a wonderful job on every panel or most of the panel that you can see. So Exclamation point Danabo in my
Did we all
chat.
get moved?
I think we're all getting moved.
Oh god.
Yeah, we all got moved. We
Yeah.
didn't for the last like 20 seconds. You sat down at your chair at the restaurant.
Yeah, basically it's just like a restaurant. Like you sat down and you just eat, you know? Like it's the same for me. I just sat down and I host the panel. But anyway, all of this is thanks to Danabo. So if you want to show some support and get something out of it, gelshockcbd.com, enter the code Danabo, you get 10% out of it. CBD is amazing. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. And with that being said, let's jump right into the first topic, which is what is the future of intellectual property? With technology evolving and everything, what is the future like for code and stuff like that? Throwing code randomly, not targeting anyone. Anyway, yeah, let's start with Tiberius.
Yeah, I'm actually glad you picked me up on this one first. So I've been talking about this for a while because this is an issue I'm really strong about, and that is intellectual property is a little goofy. What we basically do as a normal is that we have somebody come up with an idea, and we basically go through patent law or copyright law, where like, hey, this is mine. The government recognizes that it's yours, and then they basically legalize and enforce a monopoly upon that. Now, I think that's a little goofy. I am a capitalist. I'm not going to say that like the reward structure is a bad thing. I think it actually has a lot of good, but we've done it wrong. What we need to do is that we need to, instead of giving somebody a mandatory monopoly on a certain product or some form of copyright, like, you know, Mickey Mouse as an example, you give people a minimum royalty so they can always recoup the losses, but it doesn't completely destroy the market that actually benefits you and me. I think that's actually in a nutshell where we want to go and what I've been advocating for. But if somebody has anything else that they want to throw at me, I'm totally willing to listen to that. But I'll end with that for my intro.
All right, I'm going to throw it to Carl. ChanceOfFluri.
What's that? Sorry?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I basically, I think that in terms of intellectual property, I think there's a lot of ways in which it would stifle the creative process, kind of along the lines of Tiberius's thinking. I think that there are a lot of ways where we could open up the market and allow more competition to actually make things better. So I don't see why we should create this. Again, it's a monopoly. So I just think that the future of intellectual property should be that we kind of do away with the notion.
All right. I'm going to throw it to Rose Wrist.
Yeah, so when it comes to patents and copyright and general intellectual property laws, I think that it's probably generally a good idea to have some form of minimal compensation for it, just like Tiberius talked about. I believe that a reasonable standard for this would be, number one, making up for obviously all the investment they put into the product originally, and then probably a bit more so they can make a profit above that. I believe that this is vital for the production, for the incentivization of innovation for these technologies, because unless these firms or these organizations can be assured that they will, be compensated for their investment and reap some profit, you would see negative effects on their proclivity towards innovating in the first place. Furthermore, I think we need to see more integration of broad patent and copyright laws into trade agreements to make sure that there are more international agreements and regulation on these types of things to prevent some of the situations we see right now, where there are certain countries which are utilizing the intellectual properties of other countries, but because the WTO might be a bit too weak or they might not have enough reach, then there isn't really much that can be done about that for the moment. And because we live in a globalized economy, they can reap the profits of that. Now, one of the topics that is often talked about when it comes to this topic, especially now, is in regards to vaccines. I think that this isn't super really related to vaccines, and I don't know why it's constantly brought up, because it seems right now for the moment that vaccine waiving needs to be done a lot faster than IP waiving is typically done for it to have any effect on the global pandemic as it is right now. There also seems to be other more meaningful barriers to vaccine distribution than the patents that exist right now. So patents or waiving the patents don't seem like they are right now the best way to encourage vaccine production. There seems to be more supply side issues for the moment in a bunch of other countries that are hampering their ability to have vaccines rather than the patents. But yeah, generally in favor of them. I don't believe you should be given an infinite monopoly, but a temporary monopoly until you have recouped your losses and made a bit of a profit is probably a good idea.
All right. I'm going to throw it to North Countryman.
What we're seeing in the modern, I've agreed with a lot of what the panelists have so far said, and I am muted on my end. Excuse me, just a second. Is that, yeah, every time I click on Discord, it mutes my stream. So sorry about that. Is that what we see with patents in our current system? Is that most major corporations that do this kind of R&D, they'll use patents defensively as a way to stifle off any other competition, and that actually hurts innovation rather than improves it. One other among the solutions that were mentioned by the panels, another would be to increase the strength of to create a positive relationship between the strength of the patent and how much time to market from creating the idea, researching and developing it, and then it hits the market. Because otherwise, if you're just making slight tweaks to the item and you just store really strong patents on that, it makes it difficult for new creators to make new things because those patents have been taken care of. But I think this will be an interesting discussion.
All right. I'm going to throw it to Habeas.
Let corporations reap profits. I won't say they do reap huge profits, but we all know that some products are more successful than others. They won't innovate, and yeah, there's some truth to that. I think in general there are a lot more arguments against capitalism as far as innovation. I think there are all kinds of reasons why capitalism is bad for innovation. But as far as pharmaceuticals, I think we've seen empirically that, yeah, they'll innovate, but they innovate whatever's most profitable for them right now. Things like dick pills, that's what they were working on until COVID came along, and it was basically too late. It's not like no one knew that pandemic preparedness and mRNA vaccines were important, but that wasn't profitable a couple of years ago, so the big pharma wasn't working on it. So if we had a less profit motivated system when it comes to R&D, but still had lots of resources behind it, I don't know, maybe even nationalizing pharmaceuticals, not the worst idea in my judgment. I think we would have more humanitarian results. And I know I've been rambling, so I will cede the floor.
All right. Sorry about that. I got a blue screen, which happens. I don't know. Yeah, I'm going to throw it to Splunker.
Okay, so I agree with Habeas when it comes to like the patents of the vaccines. I think they, if we're looking at everything we've done through this pandemic to try to rid ourselves of the virus, lockdowns, and we're closing down and ruining businesses, small businesses especially. I don't really care about the big pharma, whether or not they have this patent. I think again, yeah, human lives are way more important, and whatever we can do to allow manufacturers to go ahead and do that, I'd be and produce these vaccines, I'd be all for. And I would also agree. I like Tiberius's way of explaining. I think I would agree a lot with the way he and Carl kind of look at things. I see the future as, again, yes, intellectual property. A lot of the way it's set up, it's stifling innovation, but there is something to be said about compensating the person who came up with the idea. So I would fall in line with that line of thought, and I'm interested in hearing, especially Tiberius. It seems like he has explored this idea a lot. So I'm interested in what you all have to say. So I'll leave it there.
All right, and SDA.
Okay. So I typically try and think about things in terms of grand historical epochs. And when it comes to the United States, this has been like one of the shorter but quite rapid growth in terms of when it comes to technology and innovation. So like we have comparisons of examples of like the previous generation in like Britain and Europe and their intellectual property and their industrialization and how hard they fought to kind of keep their technologies and their stuff secret. So when we're trying in the US to look at like, okay, what was initially the spurring thing that kind of brought intellectual property to our state and to our like to where we live? So in the Constitution, at least how it's governed here is it's like specifically to promote well, I'm speaking in US terms. I know not everybody here is from the US, but like governed wise, it was to promote this progress of science and useful arts by exchanging like public knowledge for like this certainty of basic returns. At the beginning, this was a period of like 14 years, whereas as time goes on, we now, as I think somebody mentioned, it's basically an indefinite timeline. It's almost like intellectual property has become similar to enclosure law, where you basically set up a barrier around an idea and you claim it is yours, and you go to the government and they say, yes, it's yours, and then you can go around and enforce that on other people. So obviously this has like, not obviously, but this has quite suppressive effects in lots of different fields, especially in burgeoning fields. Technology, science, and innovation, all these are currently very strenuous around like what they're going to do next in regards to, oh, has somebody already come out and patented are we going to have people sit in Amazon boxes doing manual labor with robotic work for the next 2.5 centuries? Is anybody going to look into something like that? Probably not, because everybody is already hating this idea of working for big megacorps, but it might be suppressing competition in the regards that Amazon now owns this patent, so nobody's going to invest in the wage cage. I think the larger issue is the scope and size of like intellectual property rights has been expanded so far that it gives established market players like this increasingly return benefit. If I was going to gamble on where this is going to be going in the future, it's probably towards the more globalized, like we're going to have to see the US and China like fight out over, you know, who has intellectual property over things. Like we're going to have to see like, you know, China largely, while they don't respect intellectual property rights for most of the rest of the world, they also don't regulate everything that much. Like, or they're not regulate, but they don't have the same seems institutional like checks around things. So what I would like to see, or what I would probably guess, is either A, going for that more globalized form of intellectual property, as Roserist kind of alluded to, where we're going to be doing trade agreements and kind of working through who actually owns what. But what I would actually like to see is a more decentralized, like dismemberment of intellectual property, to where more and more things are governed through strict tort law, like contractual law, rather than like a general blasé kind of public domain kind of thing, where you invent something, and if you can kind of prove that you're the inventor, you get some amount of marginal rights. But after a certain time, because you don't have the resources, you can't really defend it from bigger corporations like, let's say, Amazon hosting people on their marketplace, which somewhat of a good thing and has spurned innovation for a while, but I don't know how long that curve is going to go. You know, where they host some product and in exchange they like eventually copy it and make their own. So I generally like to fall on the side of intellectual property law cringe, but I'm more open to like where it's going to go in the future is probably like this Trans-Pacific Partnership style, like big corporations battling it out overseas over who's going to get what, rather than like any idyllic Hyperborean memery on like, oh, we're going to have super spurned innovation once all this stuff comes into the public domain, once all the science and technology of the days past, like once the original Nissan Sorento gets into public domain, we're going to have everybody building their own cars. It's probably not going to be like that. It's probably going to be wherever the government throws its money behind and whoever follows in behind it. I think a lot of that currently is going to be around green energy technologies, but we'll see. I think it's really uncertain how it's going to go.
Perfect. And last but not least, sourcing support.
So yeah, a lot of people covered some things that I wanted to speak about. I think I'll just kind of give a quick primer on my understanding of the situation. So as SDA was just alluding to or mentioning, in the United States at least, and for the most part everywhere else, the stated purpose of patents within our legal system is to promote the idea that, or promote innovation by allowing people to hold a temporary monopoly on their inventions. I think the actual year is 20 for utility patents. 17 kind of is what it ends up being in a lot of cases. But in exchange for this state granted and enforced monopoly, inventors are obliged to kind of show the public this is how this thing works and this is how you could create it yourself. And then in 20 years, you can do so. And so the idea is by making that public to everyone, we can all benefit from that knowledge. And the trade-off is that there's a pause for 20 years between that initial patent and when we can all benefit from it. In practice, I think that that's not the way it's played out. It's my opinion that government enforced monopolies were never necessary to promote innovation, and they do more harm than good, especially today. I do think that there is some need for us to protect people's property, intellectual property in this case, certainly within our current economic system. So we would want to have some sort of mechanism for this, but the current law, at least within the United States, and from what I've read in other countries, does not really achieve this. And there's so much gaming of this system that exists that it effectively keeps anyone out that doesn't have like a huge amount of capital already. So in the case of pharmaceutical companies, they cheat the system by like tweaking these things towards the end of their patent, and then they can get an extension or a new patent altogether, right? So most common example being they'll kind of change the method of delivery for this drug, and then that's a whole new drug. Essentially, it's a whole new technology. And in my opinion, I mean, I don't work for the patent office, but there's 3 items here that are required for a patent. It has to be new, it has to be useful, and it has to be non-obvious. Like, so it can't be something that anyone in the industry could have easily come or thought of. That's kind of ambiguous, but it's left up to the people making these decisions. So in the case of these patent extensions that pharmaceutical companies are doing, they only hit one of those. It's maybe new, like it's a change, I guess. It's a new delivery system, or it's useful, I guess you could say, but it's certainly not non-obvious, especially that they've been doing this for 30 years. It's necessarily obvious that that's what you're going to do, because that's what you do every time your patent comes to expire. So yeah, hopefully that gives kind of my general opinion on the matter. I'm not terribly optimistic for our future. I'm pretty pessimistic, in fact, and I would like to do something about it, but I think that it's probably going to go the way that SDA was mentioning.
All right, and with that being said, the floor is yours.
I have a question for Carl. You say that you would prefer if we did away with IP laws entirely, but how do you expect to incentivize super heavy, risky investments into potential innovation without the investors having some form of assurance that they're going to be able to make up for that initial investment and also reap a bit of profit to actually make the the investment worthwhile in the first place?
Well, I think that, I mean, you would have obviously some time that you, like, before you put the product to market or whatever, you obviously have quite a bit of time in order to streamline things, make sure that you're the one who's going to manufacture this thing in the best way possible, that you're going to enter the market in the best position possible. And if somebody comes along after you, takes your idea and tries to recreate it, I mean, my thought is that, like, if they can do it better than you, and they can enter the market and undercut you, then I mean that's the way it is.
So, like, if you've been spending like literally like millions and millions and millions of dollars on several like failed prototypes or whatever, and then you eventually find one that is marketable, you prepare for market a little bit, there might be word that something's coming out in relation to your product, you put it out to market, You have a bit of a temporary, like, legalized monopoly, because technically anyone can do the same thing. But then before you have anywhere near recouped all the amounts of money that you had for all the different failed prototypes leading up to that point, and before you've even like considered starting making a profit, some other people immediately begin copying it. Why not just have a legal framework in place to make sure that you will always make back the investment, rather than hoping that through the pre-made streamlining, you will hopefully make back that initial investment and a bit of profit. It
Well,
seems
a
to
lot
me
of these
why
corporations or these entities, before they, when they fail, I mean, a lot of these losses are socialized anyway. So, I mean, why would we at this point basically guarantee them any return on their profits? I just think like they should have to compete in the market along with anybody else.
Yeah, like if someone can come along and like they've sunk millions and millions and however much time and effort to actually get this thing to market. If someone can come along and like be like, oh wow, you came up with that idea, and they're obviously, we're not talking about a situation where someone like breaks in like Watergate style and steals your secret formula, like Plankton trying to steal this Krabby Patty formula. We're talking about someone who just looks at your product, develops it on their own in a cheaper and easier method, and is able to bring it to market within a certain time frame. Let's say instead of the initial 14 years that the Constitution kind of looks at, or whatever time, instead that longer time frame, let's just say you have a year. And I mean, we have an example of that now with like, at least with Moderna. Like Moderna, before they developed this thing, was totally bankrupt. Like investing into mRNA vaccines was not something that was profitable. It was just something that they were doing. And thankfully, in some regards, the pandemic came around and we actually needed this delivery device for it. And I forgot exactly where I was going with this, but essentially, like, why are we going to, if someone can come along and in a even shorter and more efficient and more compact and better time frame come out with the same product, why are we going to say, no, you can't do that, or like punish them for doing that, when ultimately we want them to compete with people who have an established market monopoly?
I mean, fundamentally, right, like at that point, like there's no incentive for a company to initially take that big investment, right, and put up that risk in the first place. I could imagine a reality in which there is no intellectual property laws, and instead of orienting your like business and your logistics around innovation, finding things out, getting a patent, reaping profits, waiting until your IP expires, and then competing regularly, you instead form your entire business around, okay, let's become the best at quickly appropriating the inventions of other firms within our sector, bring them to use as quick as possible, and bang, we have a ready-made product that these other companies spent millions to invest in and to find out, and we don't have to do any of that initial investment, but after a short period of time, which we're going to highly specialize in making that time as short as possible, we're going to be able to reap profits for something that we have not done the bulk of the investment into. I just feel like this will have a massive impediment on innovation because there's no purpose to innovate.
Real quick, sorry. I want to throw it to Tiberius, and after that, no.
Well, actually, Rose hit exactly what I was going to do. There's a framework here. So I'll take what Rose said and I'll just add a little bit onto it, is that there's a framework here. The reason we have patent laws is because of, it's basically investment security, is that you don't want to lose all your money from making an investment. I think that's really smart. Now, I just think that we've done a little bit of the wrong way in the regard that we give people investment security, but we do it to such a degree that we just basically destroy a market in suit. And I think we can do both at the same time. We can say, look, legally, we recognize that this is yours, but all at the same time, we're going to make sure that when it goes on the open market, anyone and everyone can produce that. They just owe you a little bit when they do that. I don't think this is like rocket science. Excuse me. This seems a little easier than what it should be. And if anyone has any counter to that, I'll happily hear it.
So Tiberius, sorry, I interrupted someone else first here.
North, go ahead.
I just wanted to add to what Rose is saying. What you were saying is basically what Thomas Edison did. Other people would do work, and he'd just get the patent for them and take the credit for it. And I would also like to back up what Tiberius is saying, is that the length of time that you spend on working on the thing, that should be positively related to the strength of the patent. If you spend more time on it, then the patent should be stronger. If you just make a couple teeny tiny tweaks to it, then no, you don't need a very strong patent. A good comparison that I've been using, and I'm not super tech savvy on patent laws. One of the comparisons I used for myself was, Bethesda versus Nintendo. If you take a Bethesda game like Fallout or Skyrim and you make some mods, Bethesda's fine with it. But if you make a change to a Pokemon game, Nintendo's going to drop a hammer on you.
All right. I want to fade to sourcing. After that, it will be Habeas, Rose, and Tiberius.
I just had a point of clarification with Tiberius. Are you suggesting that essentially this would remove people's ability to patent troll, so to lock down in it like a technology to where no one can use it, and basically say, look, it's open for everyone to use, but if you use it, you owe this entity a royalty? That's
more or less in a nutshell what I'm advocating for, is that when it's registered as a patent, it would basically be an open source thing where anyone now knows what your patent is, right? If it's a chemical compound, whether it's like a schematic that you how to build something, everyone's now going to be able to see that. But if you can legally prove, or at least the government should actually do this, if the government can legally prove that a company is using your patent, then that company owes you for that. And so it basically reverses the trend that we've had, where it's basically you have to defend your own intellectual property. It's that it allows everyone to do that intellectual property, and it makes the government the enforcer of it.
Right, but there would be no ability for you as someone who's filed for this patent to prevent someone from using it. They would just owe you a royalty.
Yeah, that's the entire point. Is that
that would be kind of like how McDonald's built their empire off of the back of like doing real estate, right? Like we will lease you this land so long as you comply with like our industry standards.
All right.
Somewhat.
Sorry, I want to fade to Habeas, Rose, and after that, Tiberius and SDA. Habeas, go ahead. Sorry.
Great, thank you. I just want to first say that any points that I'm making, I am intending to apply only to pharmaceuticals. Because I know that we're bringing up things like examples and like the video game industry and stuff, and analogizing is great, but obviously I don't think anyone would argue with me that this is such a broad topic in general, manufacturing, patents, intellectual property, that were we to try and come up with the best policies and stuff that was for everything to cover every base, whether we're talking about software, patents, cars, I have that's way too complicated for me. So when I'm talking about like what I think the rules should be, I'm specifically talking about pharmaceuticals. And I just wanted to clarify, someone said, and this isn't a huge point, but when it comes to pharmaceutical patents, there is a provision of entry of generic versions into the market for medicines after a period of 10 years. So makes a little bit of difference, but as far as anything for COVID, pretty much a moot point, because 10 years is way too late. So I wanted to address the argument that you're going to, like, what about the poor corporations who have put a lot of money into research and development only for someone to be able to, like, reverse engineer their stuff and steal it? It can happen. I don't know how easy or common that is for pharmaceuticals. I am in no way a pharmacist or a chemist or a scientist. But assuming that could happen, I think that happens anyway. Obviously, there's more things that are products that are more high profile. If you're gonna pirate a mRNA vaccine, assuming one had the capability, and then like start a vaccination program, obviously there's going to be a lot of attention on that. It's not as easy as like pirating a software or something, but big companies kind of complain about that now. That's the same justification that companies like Valiant Pharmaceuticals and whatever company Martin Shkreli was working for when he raised the price on whatever it was by like 1,000 times. Like, and he's not the only one. He's just the most famous one. But that is the exact argument that pharmaceutical companies are making now for why prescriptions need to cost so much, more than any person can pay without a lot of insurance help. And as far as I know, that occurs mostly in the United States because other countries have laws in effect that control prices. But in the United States, everyone's, just about everyone in Congress is in the pocket of big pharma, so that doesn't happen. Plus, if it's in a U.S.-based company, they obviously have more pull in their home country. But I'm just, but my basic point with this is that companies are always going to be making the argument that we need more money, we need more exclusivity, we need more this, and we need more that because we spend all the money to develop these things. And like, I don't see these companies hurting. I really don't. Like, it would go a long way. One would need to go a long way to convince me that any big company is like really needs to be like treated with kid gloves so that they don't go broke. I just don't buy it, and I think in general companies should be really forced to lower prices and raise wages. But and of course they'll say, but what about our stock prices? And I don't know what to do about that. I think the stock market is probably the root of a lot of evil, but I don't know what to do about it. The other thing I wanted to say was that an advantage. Let's say you are Pfizer and you develop a vaccine or a dick pill, whatever it is, and then company B comes along and copies it. Well, unless company B is also a huge company, and even if company B is a huge company, what does Pfizer have that can help them? They have a marketing budget, a huge marketing budget. And let's be honest, what does selling stuff tend to be all about anyway? It tends to be about marketing. So these companies can usually outmarket everybody else. And if we look at Microsoft and the wealth that people like Bill Gates have accumulated just for owning intellectual property rights. And again, I guess I'm breaking my own rule because I'm not talking about pharmaceuticals. I guess I'm just talking about how bad it can get when you're a company that can crush other companies. And then, basically a startup happens. Well, if I like their idea, I'll buy them out. If they resist me, I'll crush them. And then I'll invent, software that kills other software because it'll come bundled with my computer. And then I will, a patent can often be a very basic idea, one that doesn't even work in the real world, and then you can patent that, and then you hire all these people, your wage labor force, to do all the real work. And what do they get for it? Pretty much nothing. But then the company gets rich. It's just so unfair as it is that I'm not saying throw all of intellectual property out the window, but when it comes to pharmaceuticals, people's lives are at stake. And I think patents are in general bad. I would be in favor of, if not getting rid of them entirely, then scaling them down a lot, especially when it comes to other countries. Like, I would say if a U.S. company can't make their killing off of the U.S. market and they have to rely on the global market, too damn bad. There's no reason people in India should be dying because of American, stock prices. So if anyone, I really want to hit, I want to find discrete points of disagreement so that we can really kind of get into it back and forth. So if anyone wants to talk about the international versus domestic issue, I'd be interested in what you think about that too. And about generics. But yeah, I guess I've taken up enough time, so I will shut up.
All right, I'm throwing it to. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to clarify. I'm not sure anyone here was arguing in favor of massive corporations maintaining wealth. I think actually a few of us argued that massive corporations, by using their patents, are stifling innovation, stifling smaller creators. So I just wanted to offer that point of clarification.
Yeah.
Even the capitalists among us aren't massive, aren't favorite corporatists.
But yeah, there's a lot to be said here in regards to what was just said. So I'll go over that first. So your rebuttal to some of the IP laws being like, okay, well, people violate them anyway. Like, for example, what if there is a high, what if it's a high profile thing? People will just like borrow it anyway. The thing that this might stem from a misunderstanding about how IP laws work. They don't work to like some, like government CIA agents, like keep this project secret until it's ready to go to market. How it works is that it doesn't matter how many people find out about this product or how it works. It just prevents people from manufacturing that and putting their own version of that to the market. So it doesn't really matter in principle how high profile it is. If you decide to come out with something in the market that has a patent, you're going to be blocked from doing so. Now, you said that, okay, well, this could still happen. And then if that does happen, if there is still like slip ups within IP enforcement, then that seems to be an issue with IP enforcement that should be straightened up rather than an issue with IP laws in themselves. You said before that you don't notice any like companies that are having like real like tough, like bleeding financial problems when it comes to stuff like this. The article we were sent in preparation for this debate literally talked about how Moderna was about to, file for bankruptcy, and they were in a really poor situation economically before this. So that was a pretty, good example you can pull from there. You can also talk about, if you want to come at it from a more of like a socialist or workers' rights perspective, the thousands of workers who work for Moderna at the point where the company was doing really poorly economically. So it's not just the company that's doing bad, obviously, it's the workers that work at the company as well that suffer. So I don't think we should try to divorce, like workers' rights and companies entirely from one another, because there's a lot of overlap. You also said that unless it's like another big company copying you, it will more or less be fine without IP infringement and stuff like that. Number one, it is fairly likely that it would be a big company copying you. But even if it wasn't a big company copying you, what if there's a small company? They copy you really quickly, really effectively, bang, they blow up really fast, and you don't recover your investments. Why even take that risk? Just have IP laws in place anyways. In addition to that, doesn't necessarily have to be one big company or one small company that takes your IP and does their own thing with it. It could be a collection of moderately sized or small companies that all together strip out a bunch of market share from you that you could have needed in order to make up for your initial investment. So those are a few of my response to Habeas there. Then I had some more follow-up on what Tiberius said in regards to investments. There can be a lot of different like models on how we can do this. You talk about like a royalty model right off the bat. You could have that. You could have a model in which you have a temporary monopoly until your entire investment is made back, if that's something that is really important that happens in the short term. And then after that point, you can either have a retained monopoly until you have remade X amount of the initial investment, upon which point it is just made completely public, or you can have royalties after that point until you have remade X amount of initial investment. Either of them work. I can see arguments for one or the other, and they could be both possible solutions, and we could talk about both of those two different models, but both of them are most certainly IP laws, and both of them are not the sort of like permanent ones that may exist today, which there doesn't seem to be a single person on the panel that agrees with them. Then to another point that Habeas brought up that I thought was pretty good, which was, okay, what about medicine? What about vaccines? What about things that are vital? What about things where we might not be able to wait with these IP laws for them to be able to recoup their initial investments through a temporary monopoly or through royalties? What if we need them out right now and we need them to be cheap? That's where we pull in the free trade agreement integration that I talked about in my opening statement. If you have a system in which all of the nations pay in a small sum towards a greater fund within the trade agreement, in which during an event such as the global pandemic, those funds can be used towards buying up the intellectual property of potential medicines and pharmaceuticals and vaccines that are created, and they can be made available to everybody within the free trade agreement. That, number one, make sure that these are available much, much faster than any other IP laws. Number two, incurs a fairly low cost per nation, and you can adjust this by the nation's GDP to ensure that everyone's contributing an even share based on what they have. And number three, it's going to encourage more people to come into trade agreements, which is going to make free trade more effective generally, more competitiveness, in addition to being able to put in a series of other regulations through trade agreements, such as, for example, regulations on climate change or labor rights or any other sort of political goal that we might want to have. So yeah, that's my bit.
All right, I'm going to throw it to Tiberius, and after that, I want to keep it open for the rest of the debate. Tiberius, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So I only got two little notes here. The first one was for Northman. We were talking about time of investment, or basically the time that they would work on it as being like a status criteria for actually being for how long we should have the patent, right?
Time to market.
Yeah. That one bothers me a little bit because how do you gatekeep that? Like you just go into somebody's files, like you've been working on this program for like the last 10 years or whatever. Like for me, that could go to hell really quickly. And it's not to say it's a bad idea out of the box, but I'm metagaming that in my head. It's not working for me very well. Like I get where you're coming from because it does make a lot of sense. The amount of the money invested, the amount of time invested. Maybe excuse me. I get where you're coming from. I don't say it's a bad idea, whether it's time, whether it's money, whether it's resources, what have you. It's not a bad criteria, but the problem is that it's really easy to funge this shit. It's really easy to be like, well, I've been actually working on this for the last 20 years, and I'm not trying to strawman you. It's just like we can see this happening, right?
No, that's definitely a good argument.
Yeah. So for me, it's what's the simplest way that like cuts through most of the bullshit? For me, it's probably just going to be like a normalized time of frame where you are given that royalty back. And my thing is that the problem that I have with the patent system isn't the fact that you own something. That doesn't bother me at all. It's the legalized monopoly that you get as a result of that because you can screw over people. And I'm just going to aside to this in the evergreening. What have we seen with insulin? They keep evergreening the insulin so that nobody can get the new stuff. This hurts people in a fundamental way. And that's like, I'm actually going to agree with the left here. That's kind of morally wrong. Can we agree on that a little bit? Like, we shouldn't be fucking over people just to make that final end product. But on the other side of that is that I do understand that some of these investments cost a lot of money. The average pharmaceutical is somewhere between $800 million and $1.2 billion to make a new one. That's quite a bit of money, right? You don't want to just have Moderna make this and then Pfizer can make it cheaper and easier and Moderna goes bankrupt because of it. So at least for me, just a general standard rule probably is the best way to go about this, unless you've got a rebuttal for me. And then the other part where Rose was going was the time monopolies. Look, I get where you're going with that. The reason I'm just using my model is because I don't think the timing is an issue. And I kind of brought that up with the evergreening is that, all right, cool. We have a time monopoly. How long until this guy can get his insulin that he needs? Like that, some of these bother me. Maybe we want to do it by industry. So like, medical can't have a time monopoly, but a gaming system can. That's all I got for a moment. Thank you for letting me rant.
Yeah, I do want to jump on. Just
go
quickly,
ahead,
on that last point about the categories. I think we need to expand these categories because right now we just have a few and it's just largely utility. And for me, for every industry, we would probably need its own category because all of these things are very different. I mean, pharmaceutical is, I generally am against patents, but I can understand the argument, at least around pharmaceutical companies and the amount of investment and how much we need these things as a society. But anyway, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to respond to Tiberius just because I was mentioned directly. I think you and I are on kind of the same goal. Is patents should not be used to create a monopoly and stifle innovation. I think we're just disagreeing on how to get there. But when you're dealing with massive amounts of different levels of different corporations, yeah, there's going to be different ways of getting there.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I think that's what I'm reading.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not saying that we're disagreeing on the goal. I just think we're in the weeds about the little details because that's the fun part, ain't it?
Yeah, I would definitely be wary of like going full reversal and undoing kind of our 200-year tradition, or at least however long we've been doing the current system of patent law, because we are, I think, on the precipice of one of the largest wealth and power transfers in U.S. history. So how we do it now is going to affect how it's going to be done for a long time. I think that we are going to be moving from this more centralized authority, centralized kind of control of patents and infrastructure, like whoever not gets to the market first, but who kind of disrupts the market the most, like whether you have like an innovative piece of like warehousing technology or ideals like Amazon, whether you're like the first to get there and follow the money where it has gone with like Facebook, Google, and other kind of online larger based like companies. But like I feel like we're going to move away from well, maybe we move up one way so that we have more international agreements on intellectual property laws, but down in another to where we have lesser restrictions for the actual individual countries on the inside, but larger ones between these international companies who are very eager to duke it out in their free trade agreements and very much want their like intellectual property laws to extend beyond the borders of countries that we already have.
I want to chime in on this for just a second, if you guys would let me. I totally get the caution, right? Now, there's parts where cautionary people like, get on my nerves a little bit because they're like, "Oh, we've done it for this long, so this way for so long. I'm not going to put you in that category." But I think you have a point. The other side of this is that I'm going to have to disagree with where we're going on. Excuse me. I'm going to have to disagree on where we're kind of going. I don't think we're actually looking at a more decentralized world coming up. I'm actually afraid the 21st century is going to be known as the century of the autocrats. Is that we're actually seeing, with particularly over the last 10 years, that we're seeing
It's a healthy fear.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not trying to be a doomer here, but one of the things that we're seeing is like the centralization of data. We're seeing the revoking of political rights, not only within the developing world, but in the developed world itself. Look at Hungary as an example. I'm very concerned that we're not actually going to decentralize. We're going to rapidly centralize even further than we ever have before. And you know, I can get into the details of that. That's more of a different conversation. But to get where you're going with this is that if you're wrong, you're screwed, right? If I'm right, I think that system works in both, right? Whether we end up being a little bit more centralized or less centralized, is that having a royalty that goes to you that is mandated at least works at a general level. Because I think one of the big problems with the legalized monopoly system that we have now is that it helps increase the centralization, not decrease it. So that's all I got for you.
Well, maybe before we talk about like super, like intricacies about exactly how the policy is going to work, I still want to like take it back because I think there's still two people on the panel. I think like Carl and Splunker. I think initially from your opening statement, I read into them that both of you are not in favor of IP laws, like as a whole. You want to do away with them entirely. Maybe you guys can give some input because we're getting a lot of like agreement now within the other people.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also kind of semi in that boat in that I want IP law to be handled more strictly tort-wise and contractually rather than just like this blasé competition on the public kind of like you are responsible for protecting your idea rather than like trying to prove back like, oh, I came up with the periodic table first, so I get,
What do you mean by that? By like countries or like companies by themselves like defending their ideas? Like how does that work? What does that look like?
Real quick,
yeah, let them.
Real quick, Carl or Splunker, if you want to chime in, or if you have.
Well, I just think I like Tiberius's idea. I'm a layman when it comes to this, so I just come in here, and I'll admit that I'm no professional here, but I think I prefer maybe the idea of again contractually, like SDA said, you just keep it within contractual agreement where maybe you have again compensation for the idea initially, like Tiberius said. And I came here, I gave my opinion, but when Tiberius explained the way he sees how patent laws should work, I think I tend to agree with that, and I've been listening. And again, I was just more so open to the discussion. I'm not very much an expert on these laws. I didn't do all my research. I'll just admit to that. But Tiberius is where I would look more towards, or his concept of patent laws. I don't. Again, I'm not. I'm no expert on this, so I was just agreeing more so with Tiberius here.
Okay, we'll go back to SDA. So can you explain a bit more about like how this contractual decentralized mode of patent production would work?
So that's already kind of status quo in what I can understand most of how people develop these ideas and bring them to market, in that you have your idea, you share it with a few people, they either like work with you or they do not. You can protect it with non-disclosure agreements. You can kind of form contractual like ideas around we're going to go into business together with this idea, and then you kind of debate it out in the courts. So what I would what I brought up earlier with like the decentralization and moving away from these larger monolithic authorities like the U.S. Patent Office or other kind of international patent agreements within countries, you would probably have much smaller smaller administrative bodies regionally, or third-party administrative bodies that help you kind of manage who is and isn't a part of your who isn't a part of your project.
This is really interesting.
I mean, it would, you know, like we have companies and corporations that already do this in regards to, hey, do you have an idea? Well, come to us and we'll help you patent it as long as you give us 10% of the profits off the top. So that's probably where I would see within countries moving towards, as everybody else who already has their big government supported patents and protections battling it out overseas, you would see more innovation within borders rather than across them. You would see and you might still see this upward trend of somebody has an innovation and then it gets bought up by a bigger company and integrated into those larger systems, but it would be, what's the next market low? Where's the next point? And if you go with this idea of we're going to say until you recoup your investment and then it's free market, well, you would see a lot of companies just aiming for that recoup your investment plus a little bit, and then they would abandon their project or something like that.
Yeah, so I agree with you that NDA agreements have a part and step of the process towards patents, but what happens when the product goes to market, or when people who you have not signed NDA agreements with get information about the product? Then, like, what happens then? Because that's where the IP laws step in, right? To ensure that, okay, once information about the product comes out, once the product comes out, people can't just rip it instantly and do whatever you want with it. How do you solve that issue if you're only doing the contractual part of things?
Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of currently what we're trying to resolve with international patent law, isn't it? Where we have a product come to market here in the US or in Europe, and then over in China, where they don't enforce Western patents in the same way, you have just a lot of copycat products that aren't made to the same specifications or standards. So I would probably see, as we move towards kind of stricter top-down or international agreements to help enforce those patent laws within the countries, they might get looser and more regionalized, where you have like a southwestern, like I'm going to stick to the U.S. for example, like you might have a southwestern patent office and a eastern patent office and a western patent office. I'm sure that this is probably not the future we're going for because of the trend of centralized control that we've been going on for a while, but that's more where I see it, is when instead of having to go directly to the one monolithic authority that governs all of the U.S. market, you're actually competing regionally with other kind of patents and being able to take it from one market to another.
So I assume that this would require a massive amount of regulation, right? Because you would have to, in large part, section off, like in a very like interventionist manner, different market sectors within a country, or within the globalized stage, because we know now that we live more in a globalized economy, and economies tend to naturally progress towards more globalism, more interconnectedness, expanding markets generally. So you would have to do some very heavy intervention to prevent and make sure these markets stay within each other, to prevent other firms from without the market from doing research or doing market research into different other like markets in which there are patents that are made, but that they are not held accountable by the patents that are made there because you're in a different market. And it just seems like a policy and an interventionist nightmare to get this type of system to work properly.
This is counter to the idea that we're moving towards more centralized control. So this would be in response to maybe the U.S. like losing its grip as the world hegemonic leader and like losing its grip on like being a large negotiating and bargaining power for what it wants, and like having to like restrict itself back into its borders rather than, or look for more regional control rather than global control. Does that make sense? I'm not saying like this is like the positive solution. This is like what I potentially see as like a stepping stone future. Is like I've always, not always, but since I was a kid, been afraid like, oh, the United States is going to balkanize, guys, like, or we're going to have to like split up to regionally. We can't sustain this large of a nation state with so many different interests. Because like someone from where I'm, like someone from Texas, I'd be like splunkers saying howdy, and I'm like, are you appropriating my culture, sir? Someone in New York saying howdy is like, I think the U.S. moving forward is not going to be as large of a player, and we're going to have to come or hopefully we are. I would rather the U.S. be a major player because that's where I am. But instead of moving towards this trend of international agreements, it's going to be kind of tiered in a different way. I think there's going to be a lot less, I live specifically in Texas, so we're already kind of like, we want our own economy, we want to do our own thing, we have our own power grid kind of deal. So we also I've already seen, at least in the healthcare industry, people moving to, not totally healthcare, it'd be like in the third-party supplements and vitamins, is like being third-party accredited by certain non-governmental entities. So I see either within countries a rise of non-governmental entities, whereas between countries probably big multinational corporations duking it out around who has intellectual property or not.
I agree with a lot of what you said. I just think you have like the order of events incorrect. So what it seems to me like your understanding is from the explanation you've given me is that we have done more centralized power. We have made broader reaching branches of government or organizations. And then because of this, markets have been forced to expand. And this is something you're opposed to because you want more like decentralized markets. I would say that it seems more the case that it's the other way around, that because of the natural forces that exist within a market economy, it seems to be desirable for markets to expand as much as possible, right? The bigger the market is, the more potential you have to make revenue, the more access to resources you have, the more partners you can have to do trade in, the more other firms you can work with. And because we have seen the massive exponential growth of markets all across the world throughout the past few decades, we see the economy becoming more interconnected. We see more countries and more firms engaging in trade internationally. And because of this, because of the natural and initial growth of markets on their own, governments and organizations have been forced to respond to that with organizations that mediate these now newly formed broader markets. So the difference here is that I think it's the market formed first, and then the organizations that were put on top of those, rather than the organizations first and then the market. And because of this, I feel like if you were to go back, if you were to try to make the market smaller again, that would be working against the market. That would be a lot of interventionism. That would be a logistical nightmare, and that would also lead to a lot of market inefficiency. So that's why I'm
maybe not smaller, but just
real quick. Sorry,
smaller governmental bodies.
I want to throw it to Tiberius, and after that we'll go into closing statement.
I very much appreciate that. And sorry to hit the last note on that. Anyway, to what Rose said, I don't disagree with him on the general trend that's been, is that we've seen an ever bigger world, an ever more globalized world where, capital and resources are flowing between anybody and everybody, particularly since the end of the Cold War, is that everyone more or less plays by the same rules on the same page. I caution this because I think that era is kind of ending, and it's not just because of COVID, but that's actually a really good example. But we're looking at the European Union is becoming old folks' home, right? Like the average age of a European is now in their 50s. Some countries are a little bit worse than others, but like Germany, Italy are pretty bad, and some of them are following suit. So you're going to have a deflation in consumption, just to the fact that people are getting older and they're not buying as many things. Hell, Germany goes into mass retirement here in like 10 years. But anyway, where I'm going with this is that just because the rules have been the same for a while doesn't mean they can't change. And we've seen this numerous times throughout history, that a market can consolidate, is that eventually people are like, oh, well, we're doing this. We got this great empire and things are working well and we're selling in 130 countries. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait, maybe we need to shrink down a little bit. We need to work on a more specific market. This is the consolidation phase in a market cycle. As an example. And so at least for me, where I want to go with this is that I'm actually looking at a world that becomes more multipolar, and also maybe isn't the world of greater and greater growth. We talked about this on the last panel about human populations and human reproduction rates just shrinking, just dropping, where 2100 doesn't look like we're going to have 11 billion humans as much as it looks like we're going to be the freaking Eldar. People aren't having kids to the degree that they were, and that's not just in the developed world, that's also in the developing world. And the last 5 years, it looks like even the undeveloped world is starting to have less kids. So we might be living in a world of less coming up before we know it. I wanted to use that as my phone note. I apologize, Rose. I hope you can hit that in your rebuttals. So yeah, let's close it out, I guess.
Well, listen, we're going to open a closing statement with Rose. That way you can answer directly. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, sure. So to go on some of these things, I would disagree with the fact that the consolidation of market, or like the not consolidation, I'm going to get to that in a little bit, but the shrinking of markets is number one, something that is really likely to happen, or something that we're already seeing, but number two, something that is more natural in a cycle. So I can start with what appear to be your main argument for it, which is the consolidation phase of like a sector and an industry. And from my understanding of a consolidation phase, it's a phase in like a life cycle of a given industry or given market where companies are usually, or like a larger amount of companies who used to be competitors instead choose to merge with one another and form greater entities rather than compete in the smaller industries, right? They consolidate, they join together. And I'm not quite sure how this proves a notion that the markets are becoming smaller and more fractured. If anything, this seems to me that there is more merging, and when companies become bigger, when they merge more, they need bigger competitors, they go internationally, and you basically expand the market as a whole. So I'm not quite sure on that argument. I can agree with you, though, that there is a worrying trend of the possibility in, like the reduction of globalism and free trade, both the things I'm really in favor for. But I wouldn't say that this is something that is by no means like a natural state or natural progression of a market, so much as it is the effects of the very dangerous rise of far right and even in some occasions far left populism, which has a much more nationalistic, anti-free trade, anti-international cooperation, anti-coalition viewpoint to it, which can influence a lot of countries into pulling away from the markets in a way that, in my opinion, will be harmful for them because they're working in an interventionist fashion. They're pulling themselves out of markets. There'll be a lot of cost for that, but nevertheless, they will still do that. So overall, I disagree with the notion that the contraction of market will be something that will occur naturally, or that is something that is occurring now. But yeah, when it comes to the intellectual property rights, I can say very much that I am in favor of intellectual property rights. I think they're very important as a means by which to guarantee that people who make investments are compensated for them, because if you don't do that, no one will have an incentive to do an investment. There are a bunch of interesting models to how exactly this can be manufactured and how exactly this can be done. There can be variations depending on the importance of the given patent. So maybe the patent for a new brand of shoelaces that tie themselves doesn't have the same level of importance as a new life-saving medicine during a pandemic. And for those, we need separate separate mechanisms by which to handle those IP laws, one of which I mentioned, which is the integration of trade agreements to ensure that the costs aren't really high, that the patent can be bought really quickly, and that it can be distributed to a large amount of different countries, but also more domestic models of this can be implemented for smaller types of medicine. And also against the current model, obviously, of an infinite monopoly, it's probably not a good idea. And that's why all I've argued for throughout this panel has been a more temporary, more developed model of the IP laws. And yeah, that's going to be my closing statement.
All right. I'm going to throw to SourcingSupport.
Thanks. So yeah, I mean, interesting conversation. I'd like to, in the future, if any of you are interested, talk more about kind of the fundamental logic behind this, that patent law exists to promote innovation. I don't really see that as an inventor. I don't really believe people are primarily motivated by the profit motive. It's kind of something that we just naturally do. We try to improve ourselves and the world around us. But that being said, I do think that we should, grant people some protections. We should probably just think about this a little bit differently as we try to create a better legal framework. And instead of looking at ways to promote innovation, we should look at ways to protect people from theft.
All right. I'm going to throw it to HabeasHumor.
Right, so my final words in this, it would have been cool to maybe get into more of the nitty-gritty of finances, because that seemed to be a big sticking point, but unfortunately none of us really have the stats on what is costing versus what are pharmaceuticals gaining. I will say, like, in general, I say F the pharma companies. As I said in my opening, they really only innovate whatever is most profitable for them at the moment. We didn't really get into that, but we were kind of touching on it when we talked about, in fact, the last closing statement, I think, talked about the fact that, sorry, lost my train of thought, that the innovation aspect of it. Yeah, they innovate some things, but again, they only innovate whatever's most profitable to them, and that comes at a big disadvantage. That comes with a lot of cons. The other thing, and we didn't really get into it before, but I do want to drop this link in the chat, just talking about the fact that pharma companies tend to piggyback and kind of just steal a lot of publicly funded research or, charity funded research or university research. And that's something that often happens. Like, was it Microsoft? Was it Tesla? I remember seeing a discussion on this where a lot of these companies that really profit off of stuff, they did very little of the actual innovation. They kind of just took stuff that was already available. So that's another argument against protecting the pharma companies. I thought it was interesting when Rose mentioned this. Basically, it sounds like socializing pharmaceuticals across the world, like having this free trade agreement where company basically pay like a membership or a dues, whatever you want to call it, for access to stuff. I don't know what the exact name for it is, but it's interesting. I'd like to explore that further sometime. And the other thing about Moderna, I know it was mentioned that they were supposedly about to go out of business or go under before the COVID vaccine. And if that's the case, because I had said that I think these companies are basically making way too much money off of profits and stealing the labor of people, and we don't need to be protecting them financially. But if Moderna was still going out of business, then I guess the present system is not working. So something's broken. So we do need to change things. And let me see, was there anything else? Sorry, what?
I don't know if I am allowed to, but it's not. That's the thing, that they have been protected by IP laws with their new invention. So they're no longer going out of business because they invested in this mRNA vaccine, and now they have something good that they're making profit.
Yes, exactly. But were it not for COVID, they might have gone out of business. So the status quo doesn't seem to be all that great. And just in general, my closing is big pharma innovates, yes, but at too high a cost. They exploit their own workers. They gouge the market. They shut out billions of people who really need this stuff, such as India. And they foreclose new ideas. Any kind of capitalist model forecloses new ideas. I know personally from working in corporations from a long time, they really do kind of stifle new ideas. They don't want new ideas. They don't want anyone to think different. They just want the path of least resistance. And often when you really make your best innovations, you need kind of room. You need room to fail, and capitalist companies don't allow for that. So that's where I stand. And as far as the COVID vaccine, that needs to be patentized or whatever right away, and we just need to give it to as many people in the world who are willing to take it. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to throw it to Carl.
All right. Well, for me, I still believe that intellectual property laws act to create a false scarcity, oftentimes create an unnatural monopoly in the market. I don't see much, I've never seen much evidence for the fact that it actually bolsters innovation. But I mean, I'd be interested in seeing something of that sort. A lot of the times, as Rose mentioned, large companies go out of business. And I mean, as he said, jobs are a concern, and that does become a concern with the community. And in a lot of ways, those instances are already socialized. We do save those jobs in many cases. You can see that, with the too big to fail banks. You can see that with even like Tesla getting bailed out. So, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that making sure that somehow they have like this monopoly on profit is going to bolster innovation. I think that's just garbage, and I've never really seen much evidence for it, but I'm open to it. So if somebody wants to continue the discussion at some point, then I'm free.
All right, I'm going to throw it to North Countryman.
Rose, if you like the discussion of populism and autocrats, I've got a VOD you should probably check out. On the topic of innovation and patents, I think we're all in agreement that innovation is good. When people have new ideas and they can implement them and potentially get money off of them and get them out into the world, that's a decent idea. You know, ideas about money aside, but that's a topic for people who are not us. But the current system of patents is definitely far too protective. Patents last for too long, to the point where they actually stifle innovation. So there needs to be reform that allows for innovation, but still protects the investment that, you know, people take a risk to invest time, money, and effort into creating these new things. So what that ends up looking like, that's, you know, it could vary, but we're here to talk about ideas. And the idea is that innovation is good. And if patents get in the way of that, then they need to be reformed, but not done away with.
All right, I'm going to throw it to Splunker.
What the North Countryman just ended with is pretty much exactly what I would think. And during this conversation, again, I'd mentioned that I'm a layman when it comes to this topic, and I've listened to a lot of good solutions. I think we're all pretty much in agreement that patent laws are too protective, and that maybe to laxen those laws, and maybe I think we're all in agreement that those are a bit too much. And I felt like a lot of the conversations we had was was just good conversation for me to listen to, and that were that I didn't really had anything better to add. I think I was just learning as I was sitting here, because again, patent laws. Before coming on here, I had my opinions and I did state them, but I think you guys had a lot of good conversation that I'm gonna go on and ponder off of on which, and I don't know. I was just learning here, so I'll just end it there. And thank you for the discussion. I was enjoying the conversation a lot.
All right, I'm going to throw it to SDA.
So I'm caught in between the middle of this idea of we're moving rapidly towards a more globalized economy, or we're like kind of doing both at the same time, where nation states might be shrinking and falling, and things are getting smaller as they are getting bigger. There's going to be probably more regionalized authorities on this thing. People are going to be competing harder and harder at the smaller and smaller levels, even though that like the top level is probably the most exciting, kind of how we see with at least U.S. politics. Everybody pays attention to what goes on nationally, whereas regionally or locally, we're just like, well, whatever, who cares? We are all just kind of doing our own things. I think currently the way that intellectual property is being enforced is massively skewed towards the institutional players, those that really work and cooperate with the government structure, what someone who's an anarchist might say a rights enforcement agency, or playing the role as the rights enforcement agency, are going to receive the most amount of benefit. You see this like typically around like the industries that the government most cares about, whether that's technology, the defense industry. We've got, healthcare is probably a part of that. All these kind of things that if you put skin in the game with the government, they're going to come back and say, okay, we'll give you your protected legalized monopoly as long as we also get the benefit. I want to refer it back to this idea that we're on a very large precipice of, I think maybe this is something that we've always been on, or we're starting to maybe see the switch, is that we're on the precipice of a very large wealth and power transfer, and that things are not as certain as they seem to be. I've been trying to kind of bring my hopes up and white pill myself and be really hopeful about the future, because it's easy to be like, boo-hoo, we're all gonna be dead and gone in 30 years because of a global collapse. But I really want to have the innovation and science, technology, and driven global growth and increase just health and well-being for all peoples on this earth. But like, as it's currently going, global governments are like, where's my piece of the pie going to be? Where am I going to be in the next 10, 20, 30 years? And everybody else is just like crazed out of their minds on like, where even themselves, maybe that's just me, but like, I don't even know where I'm going to be in the next 5 to 10 years. But yeah, it was really interesting having this discussion coming from a minarchist, anarchist standpoint, because typically we think that if you can't, if you need the power of the state to defend your ideas, the idea isn't worth protecting. But yeah, Rose, you definitely came back and gave me like ample arguments for some ideas of the future on international agreements, but that's like beyond my scope of understanding. So thanks for the discussion.
All right. And last closing statement, Tiberius.
All right, yeah. So I've got two things regarding this. So just as my reply to Rose, and I wish we could continue this conversation on, but maybe I'll have the final word on this that will kind of cut through it. I'm not used to having other people who know econ on the panel. So yeah, I used the wrong word. Because the business cycle in a nutshell is the expansion, the peak, the contraction, and the through stage. And I was using the contraction phase as then when a market actually comes to shrink. And sometimes people think of that as the second phase where companies are kind of pulling together during the peak. That tends to get overlapped a lot. So wanted to make sure that I was using the right terminology because sometimes that gets screwed up. Yeah, sometimes markets shrink. It's just part of the business cycle. And one of the things that I was kind of arguing, at least from there, was that we might see that in the coming year. So to get into Rose's and SDA's conversations with SDA left off on me is that we might not be in a world of more coming down. It might be, a world of more for the next 10 years, maybe next 20. But I think we're seeing some serious data that lead to the inclination that bigger markets might not be the norm. But that's another conversation for another day. As far as my thoughts on patents is generally, well, they're usually good, but they have their see problems with them, and they need reforms. I don't think we need to toss them out by any measure. And I think that it doesn't take a lot of tweaking to make this work well. I think the legalized monopoly is the problem. I think most people are largely going to agree it's the power that are associated with patents that is too much to bear, and it fucks over the market, it fucks over people. And the best way to do that is still to keep a reward system structure, but also making it to where it's not a legalized entity where you can't fight it. I think most people have agreed with me on the panel, but I'm not going to do ad populum. I hope you all have, I hope most people in the audience have agreed with me on this one. And I hope I continue furthering this conversation because it's something I'm very passionate about. Thank you for having me on that topic. And I can't wait for the fun time. It's going to be great.
Hell yeah. I'm going to speedrun things a little bit because we're a little bit out of time, but that's okay. First of all, support Danabo, ! Danabo in chat, shellshockcbd.com, enter code Danabo, you get 10% out of it. Also, go follow our wonderful guest. Again, thank you for being here. Thank you for participating to this. Really appreciate it. And also, hosting a panel is hard. I know it doesn't look like it, but I'm here. It's 11 p.m. my time. I'm trying to do something friendly for everyone, basically, whether you're in the US, Canada, France, Sweden, or wherever. I'm trying to find like the right time for everyone. Basically, like taking times of of my day and everything to be here and like fucking up my sleep schedule. So yeah, if you can support the channel, follow if you haven't already, subscribe if you can, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Let's jump right into the fun topic, which is, okay, so I have two choices, and I'm going to leave it to you. First one is, what's the most exotic / interesting place you've ever visited? That's the topic one. Or topic two, what did you eat for breakfast? Or if you prefer, what's your favorite breakfast? As a French, of course, I want people to fight over food, but I leave it to you.
I'm up for either, personally. I think both of them are interesting. I think that if we're gonna get the hard combative thing we're looking for, I think we should go for the breakfast because it's a lot more of a controversial topic.
All right, let's go. No introduction statement. You can jump right into it. favorite breakfast, or what did you eat for breakfast, basically?
I'm gonna say here, okay. Anybody? I don't know what is this in English actually. Hold on. Gröt is what it's called in Swedish. Here in Sweden, we have something incredibly boring. Porridge, that's the word for it. Porridge, okay? That we make for breakfast almost like every day. It's like the standard. It's the blood and what I don't know what the correct expression is. It's basically it's the substance that sustains the entirety of the Swedish economy, okay? And while a lot of people might find it boring, okay? It's great, it's whatever. You can add a surprising amount of spice to your porridge, okay? There is something we have in Sweden. It's called Santa porridge, actually. Not quite sure why it's called that, but it's a much more delectable mix with porridge, with some more milky variants, some cinnamon, which makes it about 1,000,000 times better. And I think that this is truly the peak as far as what breakfast can get, right? It's compact. It's easy to make. You can store it. It's phenomenal. It's absolutely objectively the best type of food in order to keep you well energized and time efficient at the beginning of your day.
But is
Rose,
it
I have
PewDiePie
an
endorsed?
Also, I have an IRL Englishman in my chat, and he's saying black pudding is what you're describing. Does that sound right?
Black? I'm not. That doesn't sound like it. It's not.
about-
No, it's not black pudding. That's something entirely different.
Yeah.
No, that's oatmeal. Like Rose, is it oat porridge or rice porridge?
I don't know what the American name for the incredible gröt is, so I'm not quite sure what it is. Porridge. I don't know. That's a British variant of it.
But what's it made from? Oats?
Yeah, oats.
So oatmeal. Yeah, what we in American call oatmeal. Black
It's
pudding is
probably
something made from blood and
buried.
fat. It's disgusting, disgusting
It's something
British.
completely different. I'm gonna link this in the chat. This is what I'm talking about. This is the tomtegröt. This is beautiful. This is the objectively the best type of food to start your day with. Okay, it's so good. It's actually beautiful. But yeah, that's gonna be my take, and I'm willing to defend this to the death to any challengers who wish to challenge.
I'm lost. Where did you put this? In which chat?
And I think wait, did I put in the wrong? Wait, hold on. I put this in the completely wrong chat. Okay, well, someone got a random picture of some random Swedish food. There you go. So yeah.
I
Yeah.
gotcha.
All right.
It's like a rice porridge almost.
Yes, so nothing competes with this. I will take on any challengers.
All right. Anyone else take?
Bacon eggs, gosh darn it.
Damn it! You beat me to it. Like literally just had it yesterday. Big old New York strip and a bunch of scrambled eggs. Put some cream cheese in it. Good to go. Absolutely delicious.
Maybe just a nice pile of crispy brown hash browns.
Oh,
Nah.
No,
I'll pass on the grits.
Hash
That's
browns
no
are a good
hash browns.
side.
Oh, sorry. What's wrong with me? Yeah, I'll pass on the hash browns. If
Wait, hold
anything,
on.
like,
This is the deciding question. SD, are they oven hash browns or microwave hash browns?
Oh, oven hash browns. Like
Okay.
I do mine
Okay,
on
we
the
have some
skillet. I do
standard. There
mine
is
on the
some standard.
skillet. So
All right. Okay. There's
can
some
I trade you out for diced red potatoes? Can I trade you out for that?
oh, like German potatoes.
Well, for me, what we do is we take red potatoes, we either dice them or cube them, get them into like eatable chunks. And you don't mash them, you just kind of like bake them a little bit, and then you eat
Yeah,
that way.
like home fries.
With some
Kinda,
onion,
yeah.
some garlic.
Yeah, exactly. A little onions, a little garlic. Oh yeah, a little butter. Ooh.
Yeah, we usually call
Don't make
it
me hungry, goddammit.
Yeah, man. I'm starving now.
I started out the stream with eating. I tried to bait y'all into feeling hungry so I'd have a better position.
No.
Tiberius, with your eggs, okay, do you do them like sunny side up with the inside still soft, or do you fry them all the way through?
Oh no, so I scramble mine and
Scramble.
yeah, I scramble mine. I'll get them basically nice and like just enough where they're just cooked.
Fluffy
And then
scramble.
as soon as they're done, what you do is you cool them off with cream cheese and you mix that all in, and then maybe you'll throw a little salt and pepper, maybe a little onion chive, that kind of thing. Y'all making me hungry as fuck. Let's stop
Yeah,
talking about this.
yeah.
God damn it.
No, let's
No,
continue.
I want to know what they eat for breakfast in France, because in my opinion they have good food, but I've been dying to go. Like what in America we try and kind of steal from French food, but I think we probably do it about as well as we steal from like Chinese food. Like nothing is like really what they eat in China. So I
They-
mean, but I gotta like my ideal breakfast, which I'm way too lazy to actually make, would be like a mix of starch and savory. So like a croissant, like stuffed with like a cheese and like maybe a stuffed smoked
they sleep through
salmon.
breakfast and have a cigarette.
That is actually the
Cigarettes.
correct thing. I was waiting for someone to say
Oh.
that. Like,
There
what
we
are you
go.
people doing eating in the
Yeah,
mornings? It's going to slow you down. You want to have 3 cups of coffee and then eat sometime around 3 o'clock
Wait,
in the afternoon.
Why do I have anxiety?
Hit that protein and fat combo in the morning. That's what's important.
Wait, is there
What?
anyone that has their eggs like with the yolk like unfried or unscrambled or
fucking
whatever?
do that.
No,
I
those
get
are
it.
psychopaths.
How do you? How does one eat that? Okay, you eat it
How
on
does
the
one do
plate.
that?
You cut
With
it.
the
It
bread.
leaks across your entire plate. You put it in a
Here's what you
sandwich.
do.
You bite it.
Dude,
Leaks across your entire face.
Here's
It's
what you do,
impossible.
man. You take a piece of toast and you dip it.
Dip that shit in.
You just
Boom.
You got egg toast.
Problem solved, bro.
But you waste like half the yolk. It just runs onto the plate. Like you
Here's-
waste.
here's what you do.
You just
It's not
all
economically
that shit up
efficient.
with your bread, bro. What are you
Or,
talking
Oh my
That's your
god.
sponge.
the only other option is be an animal and like scoop it up with the fork and shove the whole thing in your mouth and just let it.
Just
That's
grit.
preferable
I
to like
hate
doing a
runny
gross
eggs. I
painting with
hate
your bread
runny
in the
eggs.
morning. Okay, I'm
You
gonna be
take-
real.
You need
You can put the
extra
red-
thick bacon too. That's
Oh man.
What
I
you
would
could
think
do is
that the
take your
French smoke and then milk a goat. Like they probably smoke a cigarette with a goat and then milk it and foam the milk for their latte.
What is this take?
Wake up early, real early.
Sorry, I'm American. We have to make fun of the French because we are so jealous of them.
Okay, look, European cuisine, we can agree with this, Mr. Gay. I promise you I'm not buttering up because you're the mod, okay? European cuisine, in every sense of the word, unless you're looking for like the absolute biggest calorie bomb you could like want to find, European cuisine is just outweighs it in every way, shape, or form. Can we agree on this, Mr. Gay?
As long as it's not English, we're good.
I was gonna say, does European include English people?
Hey, they left the EU now. We don't think of them anymore. Okay, they're on their own
Excuse
island.
me,
doing their own
sourcing.
thing, okay?
Breakfast is the most
You want a
important meal
boiled
of the day.
steak for breakfast? Like,
They left the EU, so fuck them. But no.
Yeah, they're gone. They're gone. Okay, in the bin. The British. All right. Well, I think we have pretty good.
Anyone
consensus
else
here.
wants to give their take? And yeah, no,
I'm-
go ahead.
There.
Yeah.
What you could do, take the runny eggs, put them in like an oatmeal, and then you can mix it up and it adds like a little bit of just adds a little bit of protein to your oatmeal. It's actually pretty good.
What is this
Or
man talking about?
or you could do hard boiled eggs and it's fine.
There you go.
Our bellies work as well.
Everyone here is
My-
just
my own
toasting
breakfast.
Pop Tarts, but won't admit it.
nice poached egg is always really good.
My
too.
breakfast today was bagel with cream cheese from chives from my garden, which means that I have literally touched actual grass today. So you're all in trouble. You know,
Patch Adams touching grass.
yeah.
Impressive.
This is only for the Funtime stuff.
Mr. Geek's
Oh,
touching
wow.
grass, but
Yeah,
He's
he
upset right
reminded he
now.
had to do that.
Listen, I'm the moderator. I cannot speak. I cannot chime in. You're all triggering me so bad right now. So we're going to move on to the next topic.
No.
If I could just make one, if I could say one more meme.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was calling this, I had internally called this the Hippy Dippy matinee panel because it was earlier in the day, which I kind of like because the word matinee is vaguely French, just like our host.
It's 100% French, but yeah.
Yeah, it's vaguely French, but you know, it's not actually. We
And
all know
French
you live in.
Canadian is like the matinee version of French.
You can't see it, but I have a U.S. Canadian crossed flags on my lapel pin
Yeah, so
Solidarity.
that I got from Vancouver, which is the most exotic place I've been. So I'm glad we went with the breakfast topic.
pretty exotic.
That's a good way to wrap it
you're
up.
not eating poutine, are you?
Not today. I did yesterday. That was my yesterday's meal.
Yo, poutine is delicious, man.
We live in an area where the chip stands is what we call it. They're like famous for a poutine.
Very competitive market, the chip stand market, really.
It is.
Oh, I saw it in that movie, Les Demoiselles de Rochefort.
Hmm.
God.
Okay. Well, I agree with almost everyone here except for the people that have their yolk uncooked, so it leaks all over the plate. You guys are beyond.
Well, that's because what? You don't eat toast with your eggs?
You do, but you ate them, you completely fry them, and there you go. You bite it, and it doesn't leak all over your hand and
That
mouth.
sounds
You can't do that, but you're acting like
Are you the kind of guy who also
You dip
like
the
cooks his
toast in it.
steak
Okay,
with,
enough,
like-
enough. I'm really getting triggered right now. I think I mean, everyone else palate except mine was cleansed. I feel like it's more dirty now than ever. But yeah, let's go into the next topic, which is robot cops. So basically, should police have access to robots? So we can talk about like the Boston Dynamics dog. We can talk about like usage of drone, for instance, like there was in London during COVID. You take this wherever you want, and we're going to start with North Countryman.
So sometimes when I'm when I'm looking at modern day political issues and I look at what Republicans are saying, I'm thinking, oh, God, do I really want to stick with them? Then I see things like this Robo issue and what Bill de Blasio and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez take, and I think, okay, nope, I'm not going with these guys because that Robo dog it has a sticker price of about $94,000. But if you understand budgeting of any kind and you know something about called net present value, the lifespan of that thing is going to be a lot less than having to pay police officers to patrol that same area that dog can patrol, and it'll be cost a lot more money. So just getting rid of the thing because I don't know, you're afraid of robots taking over the world, that's just ludicrous. And trying to get rid of it, as Mayor de Blasio said, because it's ugly and divisive. Well, people say that about wind turbines and me, and we're not going anywhere. So this is a good thing, the RoboCop. Getting rid of it is just the peak of bad politics.
All right, I'm going to throw it to Rose Wrist.
All right. Yeah. So when it comes to the integration of robotics within policing, I see the potential for a lot of positives. So the most, common one being saving costs, more efficiency. So another example beyond the Robo dog that I can take from that's from the United States that's from Europe. The Netherlands have an extremely good system when it comes to catching people who speed. So rather than in almost every other country, there are speed cameras set up. They take a picture of you when you pass, and then they check how fast you were going and send you a bill if so needed. How the cameras work in the Netherlands is that they are distributed along the entire roads, and they take a snapshot of you every time. And instead of measuring your speed when you go past the camera, what they do is they check, okay, how far did you go, and how much time did it take you to travel that distance. And there is literally no way you can cheat that system, right? With the regular speed cameras, you go really fast, camera coming up, okay, let me go really slow for a while, and then go really fast. With that camera, there is no getting around it. You need to go at the speed limit, otherwise if you go over that, it will calculate that you traveled this distance in a faster speed than is allowed, and therefore you're gonna get sent a ticket. So stuff like that, really cool, very efficient. Reduces the needs to have police there, standing and checking people with the little scanner, things that they have attached to their cars and stuff like that. So that's an example of more efficiency. Also, in the specific example of the dog, there's less danger for the police, which is a good thing. I would hope that everybody on the panel would agree that having less dangerous jobs is probably a good idea overall. It seems to be relatively cost efficient for a range of different integration systems, obviously not all, but yeah, it seems pretty good. Also, you could even make the argument that depending on what type of integration of robotics you have, there could be an aspect of reducing racial bias when it comes to the way robots is integrated. So for instance, when it comes to maybe security cameras or checking speeding tickets, or like I mentioned previously, rather than having an officer, like an individual person having to make that judgment and who to pull over and stuff like that, having like the robotic speed cameras that check things in a much more direct way and with less regard to the occupants of the car could be a lot of a better way to do it. So yeah, that's another argument. That's another aspect of it. There's an aspect of reducing racial bias that may exist through the integration of these robots. The only really negative I see here is that even though we may say that, hey, a lot of the Democrat reaction to this might be a bit silly, if it is demonstrated that the integration of certain types of robotics demonstrably harms the public relations between the police and the citizenry, then it's a valid concern to not integrate that level of robotics, because that relationship between police and citizens is extraordinarily important in order to be able to do effective police work, make sure the reports come in on time, and about a million other things that ensure that a community is more safe. So while the sentiment might be a bit silly, or we might find it a bit silly, if it's shown to be significant in public relations, then it should be considered when it comes to whether or not that should actually be done, because at the end of the day, the goal is to have the most effective police force possible. And if it's interfering with that, then you probably shouldn't do that. And yeah.
All right. I'm going to throw it to Splunker.
Yeah, I'm fine with it. It depends, what you mean by robots, I guess, right? Rose gave great examples there for those cameras. I mean, those robots, and that's perfect use of how you would use those kinds of robotic technology. A thing like the dog, there was this example that was provided in this article that we were sent. It's just a robotic dog, and I again don't have that big of an issue with that. Could be, it could go and to some corners with a camera and let it would just like a drone kind of thing. So it would allow police officers to deal with these issues in a more safe way. But I also think the general population should be allowed to have robots, to have these things. If I want that dog, I should be able to get it. So that's my take on it.
All right. I'm going to throw it to Sourcing.
So I agree with most of what or pretty much everything Rosaris said. The only thing I would want to add there is the distinction for me is what these robots are. So should police have access to information gathering robots? Absolutely. I mean, a lot of the issues we see around policing right now are a manifestation of police being consumed by fear in a given situation, right? They're only human. We all kind of react in a given situation. So removing that variable, I think, would be a good thing. As for armed robots, absolutely not under any circumstance. I don't even know how that could be a question. We already outsource too much of our authority and have too much desensitization or desensitized violence by way of this outsourcing of it. So I guess I would also want to ensure that we look at any implications around Fourth Amendment rights and ensure that these robots are only being deployed in public spaces. But yeah, aside from that, I'm on board.
All right. I'm going to throw it to Tiberius.
Yeah, I might have some levels of dissension here for the panel, so at least we'll have some content, I guess. Two things. Number one is that we got to be honest here. We already have robots within police forces. We talked about Portland, or I'm sorry, not we. A lot of people talked about Portland and the police drones that are going around pretty much constantly at this point, just looking out for different protests and all these things going on. So it's kind of already a reality. The point of where this goes is this okay? And then if we're going to drag it further. I have some really mixed thoughts about this. I'm not really a big fan of speed cameras as an example, but my issue isn't the issue with speeding nearly as much as that I believe that speeding in most countries is used as a racketeering kind of thing. My big policy solution for this has been always to my big policy solution for this has been to walk back financial penalties for misdemeanor crimes, right? So you're not going to fine somebody for having a little bit of weed on them, or you're not going to fine somebody for speeding, because honestly, I don't think most of these things matter when it comes to actual law enforcement. It's just a way to balance the books for a lot of folks, and that's literally just legalized corruption. This gets into so many details. I don't know where to start, to be honest, but at least as a whole, just for the intro, is that moreover, I don't have a problem with robots in the police force, but the way that we enforce things is more where I want to tackle. And this can make this so much worse in the regards that I feel that one of the biggest problems here in the United States regarding our police is that we don't really care about community policing. You have officers from one district go to another district to actually do their job, and they're not embedded in the community. And adding drones and police robots to that actually dehumanizes the police even more. So just 1,000 ways I can go about this. Feel free to scream at me here in the open panel section. But that's my intro.
All right, I'm going to throw it to SDA.
All right. I think the coffers are starting to dry up for police departments, or at least potential avenues for them to generate revenue. They're seeing a world increasing where it is increasingly difficult to justify their massive budgets, manpower, and resources without really anything to be scared of. I think that like reading into Mayor de Blasio's comments of like, oh, this is dehumanizing or this is going in the wrong direction, like speak to what I see as his own personal fiefdom with what is essentially equates to a private army of gangs and thugs that are going to enforce his decrees. I think like overall, as we move into a safer, more secure, more interconnected society. I don't know how to phrase it in a way that doesn't sound like it's all hopes and dreams for the future, but like I think that replacing what is potentially a very dangerous job with robots is probably a good logical next step. We're already seeing it in almost any other industry where like even in the healthcare industry where you have like surgeons having robots doing almost all of the work for surgeries because it's like so much easier to fuck that up and get something wrong and put somebody else's life in danger. There's definitely going to be kind of a public onus that we have to, or not onus, but a public kind of fear factor that we have to overcome. And people are going to have to get used to the idea of instead of being patrolled by a police officer, is you're going to have the robot dog. I just don't want to see them become armed in any capacity. You know, I don't want we don't want to be concerned with protecting our police robot dogs like we're concerned with protecting these police dogs as real law enforcement officers. There's a lot of like really dangerous situations that like we don't need armed gunmen to respond to, but like we should have definitely like a step removed in between. Oh, is this person like actually a threat or not? We can send this robot to negotiate with them and like figure out what kind of response we actually need to do. Overall, robot dog's pretty based. I'm just gonna have to come up with a new. I wish I came up with like a little skit or bit for this. Like got some robot glasses because the dog's in the name. So I see the pushback coming from probably the people who have the largest vested interests, and that is police forces with massive budgets and like pensions to protect.
All right, and I'm going to throw it to Cal.
Okay, well, for me, it's a lot of what I would think has already been said on the panel. I think if we, I'm not a fan of the massive police force that we currently have. I am a fan of reducing their budget. So if this is a way that we can reduce budget, save lives, I think that's great. A couple of the things that have been mentioned, like community relations and armed robots, obviously, are some things that are going to have to be taken into account. I wouldn't be a fan of armed robots, and we obviously want to make sure that our community relations between police and the service and the people is still pretty solid. One of the things that Rose mentioned was the reducing racial bias, which I can see some problems with because there's already like AI that's out there that's known to do kind of like to have some faults when it comes to racial profiling in and of themselves. So that's again something that we might need to keep an eye on in the future. All in all, we don't want to give over complete agency, but if it's a way to save some lives, save some budget, and maybe have robots doing some stuff that humans don't necessarily need to do, I think that's a great way to move forward. So.
All right. Just to be sure, Habeas, did you go?
Not yet.
Perfect. Your turn.
All right. I want to start off by addressing the comment in the chat that says in the shops, at the doctors, the police, etc., is it all just going to be robots? And I think increasingly the answer is yes. I don't think there's any stopping automation, for better or for worse. I think we're going to go more and more towards the model of like when you go to the grocery store now and there's all the self-checkouts and there's like one or two people kind of overseeing. It's going to be like that. There's going to be like probably human supervisors for like anything that's customer facing, and we're going to automate as much as possible, maybe even in restaurants. I mean, on the one hand, you have the loss of jobs. On the other hand, I mean, that could be a good or bad thing. Just having work doesn't guarantee a good lifestyle. So, we could become a dystopia like in all the science fiction TV and movies that has this stuff, or well, in some of it, or we can become more like I was gonna say more like Wall-E, but they went too far the other way. They had everything really smoothly automated, and then everyone just sat and like their muscles atrophied, and they got really fat. Oh, not that I am fat phobic. I am a fat person myself. So but like people were very clearly unhealthy, and that's how they depicted it in the movie. Any hoozle, that is a digression. I want to address the article about that was sent to us about the New York City Robo dog, since that's what sparked this off. And so there were, I guess, some issues. Now, I think that the Robo dog would have gone over a lot better had it had a head. How much would it have cost to put a head, like a smiley Scooby-Doo face on that robot dog? Because without the head, that looks freaking creepy. It resembles more of like a giant mechanical cockroach than anything, even though it only has 4 legs. But it's like freaky, and it's creeping people out. And while I think people's objections to it were a little more robust than just it's creepy, that's sort of the soundbite that was taken from Mayor de Blasio about, it's creeping people out. Yeah, it is creeping people out, but I think the reason that they got rid of it was more like people were thinking this is, like others were saying, a step towards a dystopia, a step towards more brutal police force. And there's pros and cons. Like some were saying that it might be better if you have a machine trying to make decisions. Of course, as others were pointing out, any kind of AI programming is very imperfect thanks to human error and human bias. So that remains to be worked out. As far as replacing police dogs, very interesting idea. If a chip could duplicate a dog's sense of smell, that would be awesome. That would have a lot of applications. As far as a blanket ban on arming any police robot, I mean, probably. It's usually against the law to have any, what's the word I'm thinking of? Like security device or any kind of machine that can cause deadly injury indiscriminately. Of course, with AI, it's no longer indiscriminate, so I bet those rules are going to change. That's going to be an interesting legal issue. And, yep, I'm going to stop there.
All right, and you can engage.
Yeah, I have a few things on what you said, Tiberius. So I can go off what I agree with first, and then we can move on to stuff I don't agree with. So the point you made about potential dehumanizing with the police and the issues with that in public relations, yeah, 100% we agree with that, and that's something that needs to be measured and taken into account. And we don't want to like push this something that's too fast. It's going to hurt public relations, because public relations with police are extremely vital for the police to be able to do their job efficiently. I will also agree with you that the possession of weed as a crime is very insignificant and is definitely something that is used to pad the statistics. I am generally in favor of more like liberal drug policies, looking into decriminalization, legalization, depending on the substance, depending on the situation in the nations, are some things that I'm in favor of. So I agree with that. The rest, though, I think I have a bit of some issues with it. Your statement that like comparing the possession of weed to speeding, speeding tends to carry with it a much higher likelihood, or how many muches is necessary there, but a significantly higher likelihood of engaging in accidents. But even beyond that, it also dramatically increases the severity of the accident because of the speed, right? There's more energy, there's more things that can go boom, basically. Well, not necessarily boom, but more crash. So I don't necessarily agree with putting those two in the same bag. I still think speeding as a crime is something that should be fairly well regulated to ensure that people are using the roads in a responsible manner and are being just generally like responsible and compassionate drivers to the people around them. Now, I can also agree with you to some extent that, hey, maybe there exist police departments today that just grab people for speeding, on like very, very fine lines due to the fact that, it fills their statistics and it makes them look good. Sure, I would argue that if anything, robots would be able to make this a lot better, right? Because there you would be able to have strict standards. Okay, you need to go exactly this much faster in order to ensure that this registers. There is no potential for human error in the measuring of the police officer. There is basically, it's a lot more streamlined. There's a lot less of a room for error, and there is a lot less of a possibility for perverse incentives in the sense that what you were talking about there are just filling up like the different crime lists and stuff like that. So yeah, those are my main disagreements. The linking of waiting and speeding as crimes of similar magnitude, and then how robots would probably improve a lot of the issues you see right now with how speeding is handled.
Yeah, so I don't disagree with most of that, and I can agree that my framing was a little bit overgeneralized comparing one to another. That is a little different. And speeding's no joke. On the other side of that, and you know, this might be a little difference between. I don't know where you live. I assume you're in Europe. You said.
Yeah, Sweden.
Yeah. I assume there's some significant differences between how the Europeans police and how the Americans do. Like one of the issues that I have seen, and whether it's a right or the left here in the United States, we all kind of agree that police kind of suck. But one of the things that I've noticed that we actually do agree on is that police will come bother you for shit that really they shouldn't bother you with. And I think a lot of these things actually is perverse incentives from the fact that you can make money off of them. We've had issues here in media and both, just in real life that we've had police departments making up over 10% of their budget just in the fines that they collect. That literally is, if you will, government corruption, government extortion, what have you, where it's going to sour the relations of the police here in the United States, but also in the regard that it's going to make them become, it's basically turning them into a racketeering agency. And I don't mean to demean police in that regard, but like when you're giving out speeding tickets for being 4 miles an hour over the speed limit because you've got a quota to fill, that does a lot of damage to your public relations, and also makes you basically use time that you probably could be used spending elsewhere, on something that is far more serious. I have no problem throwing a person in jail for going 15 mile an hour over the speed limit, but there's levels where this shouldn't happen, if you will. And there's just no nuance to it, because it's just, oh hey, you know what, we can get my bonus with this speeding ticket or some shit.
Wouldn't robotics just make that better then, to ensure to minimize the risk of misuse, to ensure that there is more objective evidence on both sides, so that if this were to go to a court of law, there's less human interference and less of a likelihood for human error or interpretation or bias in the event? That's one thing. And then the second thing is that even if I grant literally everything you've said now and agree with you to the fullest, I still don't quite see how this is an issue inherent to the topic of discussion with robotics. I would still say that even if I granted everything, it could still happen with robotics or without robotics.
Yeah, so I'll wrap this back in, and because you hit the point, and that is the robots will decrease human error. I actually agree with that, and that's a pretty strong side to the pro robots point. The other side of that, though, is that we'll remind you that robots are programmed, right? So whatever the criteria is that is a universal constant. So as an example, just to throw it out there, let's say you are speeding, and you might be speeding to a little bit of a ridiculous degree, but you're trying to get your kid to the hospital, right? A police officer can actually interdict and be like, oh, there's an emergency, I'm going to maybe even escort the person to the hospital, something like that. A police camera cannot do that. A robot usually won't do that. They don't have the ability to think and discern. And that's where I get on that, is that the reason I actually prefer human police officers more is they have the power to discern. And a lot of times it doesn't go the right way, so I can totally get if somebody's going to shut me down on that regard. But I feel like in some regards we have to trust people to do right by others. And, one of the things that we can do to help that is getting rid of financial penalties for misdemeanors, so the police don't have to enforce those to a stupid and idiotic degree. And I apologize for paralleling that into a different conversation, but I feel like no matter what way, I can't escape that. So, insane.
So these issues though that come up, we can address in court, right? So like if there were some circumstances where you shouldn't receive some ticket or citation or whatever, then bring that to court. That's something we already do. But yeah, I agree. I just think it's a lot easier to codify these things, audit them, right? So like all these things are coded, it's auditable. There's just no ambiguity here. I'm just failing to see, as long as it's all for information gathering purposes and we're not using it to like do actual law enforcement, so much as it is gathering so that humans can then take that next step. I just fail to see how it could be a problem.
Oh,
If I can potentially,
no, go ahead.
if I could take both of your points and somewhat weave them into mine, because why not? So one of the things that is kind of missed in the debate over quote unquote defunding the police is the idea that you can actually do budgeting in public administration. Sorry, I'm nerding out a little bit, called activity-based budgeting. You assign value based on what that, getting some noise, but based on what that department does. And that can be applied to businesses, that can be applied to departments. So if you have, say, robot dogs that are doing surveillance and patrols that uniformed in-person police officers would be doing, that's a cost you can potentially reduce. If there's things like mental health checks, that New York City, we saw that they are actually doing a pilot program where non-police officers are responding to that. That's, again, something we can take off of the shoulders of police officers. And this is an area where and you can use robots, you can use other departments, and you can kind of ease that burden off of police officers and reduce their budgets. And so there's options to work with there. And so robotics are definitely helpful in this. Again, I could have phrased that better, but that's me.
I mean, there's another point, if there's nothing else that immediately comes up that we can touch on, which is brought up by Carl in regards to this is probably like a more my discussion, but in regards to racial bias in AI. Yeah, it seems to be some indication that it exists to some extent, and obviously we should seek to minimize it. But I would say that the possibility for like the integration for like a robotics AI system within policing that would operate in a way that would have negative outcomes and racial bias in that way seem a little bit more difficult, because what we see right now is the majority or a large part of the stops and stuff like that could have been provoked by racial bias on the behalf of a police officer tend to be stops that are excused with a more sort of like objective crime, like lack of some certain lights, going over the speed limit, and yada yada yada. And those things, I'm not quite sure how wrong or how like a racially biased AI could, like interpret that. Like, I don't know if the car is darker,
that
it
you're
can
definitely
light
touching
better.
on something that makes sense there. Like what I would say is that for speeding and stuff like that, I think you're probably right. It would reduce racial bias, if anything. I think that the information I've sought out is more that it leads to improper identification of specific individuals, and that's obviously a problem with the person programming the AI. So I think that would be somewhere where we should be looking more closely into, how we're going to use that if we're using it for any type of like specific identification for somebody who commits crimes or anything like that, like using security cameras in that front. Rather than, for speeding or something like that. I think that'd be more generalized, and you could probably reduce racial bias if you're just looking at the car and the speed, right? So
yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this needs to be tested. You need to look at the outcomes. You need to detect problems. You need to solve for them, right? Like any forms of integration into, any process that exists.
And the biases we observe in AI are our own biases. Like, these things aren't, they won't go away, period, unless using a machine learning algorithm, we're feeding in this data, and the data we're feeding in has these biases. So we're just holding a mirror up to ourselves. It's just a really efficient way of doing what we're already doing. And so it's not going to add to the problem. It just wouldn't necessarily fix the problem.
Yeah. All right.
No one got any pushback on this? No.
I mean, I think I was the biggest dissenter in this, but I mean, I think the opposition's got more ammunition than I do on this one. So, I mean, I can't really fight a lot of that.
I just don't know how present this kind of issue really is. It's like, it seems like, does anybody know the history of like where Boston Dynamics originally got their, like, this is all coming from like State Department funding. Like, this is almost directly from a DARPA program, the whole robot dog and everything. And it seems like they're trying to move from their failed contract that they had with the Marines to like, oh, we need to find somebody else to buy up our product or else we're literally going to go under. And they had that, they had the trendy dance video that made it seem pretty cool and everything. But like, I don't know. I'm not sure how prevalent or recent this is going to be.
By the way, stick around to the end of the panel. We're going to recreate that dance video, all of us, immediately.
Do you love me?
It's pretty late here in Europe. I don't know if I can sing it now, but maybe I could, if we, depending on how much time we want to keep going for, Mr. Geck, maybe we could touch on something else that that Habeas mentioned in that first panel and that she wished we talked about more, which is maybe the interest of corporations in regards to the for-profit motive and the way that intersects with social good and stuff like that. So, I mean, I don't know how much time we have left or
Oh, that,
where we
oh
want to go
god,
with that.
that is entirely a morality and ethics conversation, and like we
fun
can do
discussion.
that. Just we'll have to recognize that I don't have the same ethical codes as you all do, so we're literally looking for a compromise.
Yeah.
What are morals?
It's
Yeah, I
okay.
mean, I think it's-
Some people are just wrong.
Well, I mean, if that's the way you want to go about it, fine. But there's no point in having a conversation with you at that point.
No, actually, on my channel, I'm actually going to start trying to do some like reaching across and stuff. So I'm just being facetious.
Okay.
So can we go to that, Mr. Geck, or do you want to wrap it up?
There's something that sourcing mentioned that we could potentially go in there. I think is the use of armed robots, and we could go into a conversation of use of drones, but you know that is an
Terminators
option.
are real, kids. They're here.
I mean, I
really
think
hope
it's
everyone
funny
would be
that
against
we
armed robots.
critique the last topic because hey, like how common, how prevalent is this in regards to the dog, and now we decide to switch from that to like Terminator robots. But yeah, I don't know how much we're gonna be able to talk and have substantive discussion on this, but
Basically, we got like 15 minutes left before we wrap it up. Before we start going into closing statement, and I would even say 10 minutes left with the closing
Alright.
statement, shout out, and everything. So either we
Maybe,
jump
like-
on it, or we can talk about. Basically, if
so
it
like
if you want to go on another topic, it has to be like speedrun version of it. That's all.
alright. We can. I mean, if we have 10 minutes, we'll give people some content at least, so they have something to watch. Okay. Yeah, we can talk a little bit about that. The social good goals that you talked about, Habeas, because I think it's an interesting discussion, and we'll try to do it like pretty quickly. So, when it comes to the profit motive and competition in general, I would agree that in some cases there are perverse incentives. There are outcomes from that which may not be desirable from a social standpoint. There are market externalities which we find non-beneficial. So common examples of this, for example, may be the sale of cigarettes and the externality control the externality effect it has on healthcare costs, on other people who may not necessarily be consuming the product, on any X, Y, and Z things. A more a greater example would be, for example, the emissions from certain production cycles and the way they feed into climate change and global warming and all of that stuff. And while I agree very much that this is absolutely something that happens, I don't necessarily think it's something that is necessarily intrinsic to the profit motive as a concept. So what I would argue for is through the use of regulations that put the interest of a business more in line with what we define as social good, we can streamline the outcomes and the effects of competition and funnel it into a more positive direction than some negative externalities we're seeing now. So my key thing is that I believe that through good regulation, we can avoid most, if not all, of the negative outcomes you see with the profit motive. And yeah, I'd like to see what you think about that.
Rose, are you significantly on the left?
I'm a social democrat.
Yeah. Okay. It's remarkable. Okay, I know what it is. Is that you're an econ guy, so we look at things in that same regard. Yeah, because like in a lot of ways, I kind of feel the same way. I am for a capitalist, but on the other side of that is like I think that there are problems that has from like profit motive and basically companies solely chasing after profit without any kind of like check. And so yeah, I actually kind of agree. Like a lot of the things that we do see that we particularly don't socially like or whatever, we can agree on that that we can in some way regulate, but also mitigate, if you will. Like we can take one thing and counterbalance it with another, or we can try to like I'm going to offend people here, maybe use social engineering as an example, right? Is companies are literally making money off of getting people fat. Well, we can dump money into making people skinny, right? So I'm actually remarkably amazed at how much we agree on things to some degree.
So I don't really. I mean, I agree with your points on how we can like reduce the harm that these things cause, but I'm still not convinced that the profit motive is optimizing for anything other than profit. Like, it just kind of, it's a circular thing, right? Like, if your motive is profit, then that's going to be your priority. Anything else is a byproduct. So like, I don't have a problem with that necessarily. I mean, I think that it's a perverse incentive for doing anything that we're talking about in terms of like advancing society. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with some of what you said. Like, if I were to like do a bit of a more, I suppose, like narrative view on this, the way I view like markets and competition is not like a lot of people on the very far right will view it as this is this amazing system, invisible hand of the market. We will get maximum good always, just leave everything be, and we will see a phenomenal increase in all these X, Y, and Z things. I also don't agree with a lot of the elements of the far left, which like or like completely condemn the effects of like markets and say that these can never be effective. We cannot use these in a responsible way. Their outcomes will always be negative. So the way I sort of look at markets and competition and the profit motive is it's a form of like very strong and very powerful driving force in a society. And like all really strong forces, if it's not handled correctly, it can have devastating negative effects, i.e. climate change. However, if it is funneled and if it is controlled in a proper manner through a good, in my opinion, legal regulatory framework that tries to cut off as many of the possibilities for this energy to do harm and for it to engage in behaviors that we don't see as desirable, we can sort of harness as much positive as possible from competition, from the profit motive, in a way by which we can see that we can make phenomenal progress socially and economically. Because at the end of the day, I do believe to some extent that, hey, competition is good for certain types of innovation, for the for the creation of certain products, for the management of systems, for X, Y, and Z. And that's like the sort of like way I view the profit motive. And I believe there's some industries that, hey, it seems very difficult to regulate the profit motive in this specific industry to a way that we find desirable. So these industries, we could probably nationalize them. So in my case, I have this really strong opinion about education, for instance. That's one they will never, ever budge on. That should be out of the hands of the market completely. And then a few other ones, but that's like my main one. So yeah, that's, I suppose, my general view on competition for profit stuff. So.
Rose, you're making a lot of really good arguments for competition, economics, and rule of law. Are you sure you're not a righty? Because they're pretty.
Oh no!
Wait, when did economic comprehension become a right-wing thing? No, I reject this
I can
entirely.
hear through. I can hear. It's starting to sound like an omnilib. That's what it is.
Okay, I can tell you. I'm in favor of strong social social systems, a welfare state, public education, public healthcare, all forms of like progressive systems of social justice as possible. I like cooperatives as a concept. I think we should invest in them more, and we should have more of a creation of them across the economy. Measure them, see what they do. Maybe look into encouraging them in certain sectors above others. Yada yada yada. I don't think that economic literacy by any means is something that is exclusive to the right, but it saddens me to see like the points we've gotten in a political discourse where people who are economically literate are immediately seen as being on the right, and that bothers me as a left-leaning person who like.
Yeah, I'm just going to make it
just needling you a little bit.
After that comment, I'm definitely going to say we're excommunicating him from the right. He's not allowed over here.
There you go. That's fucking okay.
I think we can get a little bit
marginally. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm only marginally acclimated with economics, and even I'm like, you just sound more like not. I'm just glad you're not as statist as somebody who might be more aligned with you usually sounds. You're not as gung ho as a progressive who just wants everything that they want now, and they're going to listen to nobody else. They're actually trying to negotiate their position.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Also, maybe you can drop a little bit last stick of dynamite before we log off. As a European, owning guns is cringe, and Second Amendment is dog shit.
Yep, disown his ass. Disown his ass forever. Get the fuck out. All right. No, it's been fun.
I think we can wrap this up now with this absolute truth being dropped. So yeah, let's go into closing statement and shout out. Basically, like tell people where they can find you. But first, thank you everyone for joining us. I really had a blast hosting this. So yeah, thank you everyone. Go follow our wonderful panelists today, all of them. And yeah, closing statement, shout out, tell people where they can find you. And we're going to start with ChanceOfFluri, Carl and Splunker. Let's start with Carl.
Sounds good. Appreciate you having me on. This was awesome. This is great. You guys all brought forward some really good, points on the topics at hand. I appreciated the good conversation, regardless of if we completely agreed or not. I think it's kind of interesting to have this reach across. So, that's kind of something that we like to do on our show. We just discuss back and forth. One of us is a little bit more right-leaning, one of us is a little bit more left-leaning, and we kind of discuss current topics and stuff in Canada. If that's something that interests you, check us out. ChanceOfFluri is the channel. We're just going to keep making content, and hopefully we can be on with you guys again. So that's it. That's it for me.
Yeah. Splunker.
Yeah, same for me. For me, this was more of a listening session, but I appreciate it. You guys are all very, very smart people, so I was enjoying to just sit here and listen. And next time, if you have me on again, I'll try to engage a little more. But we all seem to agree when people when we agree on the generalities of things. I tend to just listen because some of you are more educated on some of these topics than I am. But again, at the ChanceOfFluri, that's where we are. We like to just bounce around with ideas and talk Canadian politics because again, there's a lack of that. We find just Canadian content, fun, entertaining content where we just have fun. That's based around Canadian politics. So that's what we do, ChanceOfFluri. And yeah, thanks again for having me. This was very educational and fun.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. I'm going to throw it to SourcingSupport.
Yeah, enjoyed the conversation. I wouldn't. It's a rarity that these panels are so civil. So thanks everyone. I'm definitely open to having further conversations around certainly patent law, but IP more broadly speaking. If anyone's interested, feel free to drop me a note. You can find me at SourcingSupport here on Twitch, and that's pretty much it. Everything else I do is more industry related for my day job.
All right, thank you for joining us. And now Tiberius D.
All right, so I'm Tiberius D. I do 3 major pieces of political content. The first is geopolitics, where I just kind of talk about what's going on in the world and why that might be happening and some of the history going on with that and the geopolitical factors, such as the climate and geography and all these other things that are going on. Second is tonight you can catch out the Mascot podcast. So if you like Counterpoints, if you like Osiris, if you like Samantha Banana or me, you can definitely just kind of see us shooting back or sitting back shooting the shit. Other than that, we do political conversations every now and again. It'll be interesting next Friday. Be sure to check that out. And then finally, I do reviews. So if you want to hear about why Darth Vader is kind of a lame villain or why the 12th Doctor is amazing, definitely come check out my channel there. So plenty of stuff for you to come look at. Maybe not everything that you would want, but maybe a little bit of something. And Geek, thank you for having me on this panel. I'm so glad I reached out to be back on the recruitment panel because it's always so much more fun than most other ones. And I'm not bullshitting there. Like it's usually very civil. It usually doesn't get too heated, and that's kind of where I'm for. I don't really care for the drama Olympics that we see on some of Twitch politics. So thank you again for having me here.
Listen, if there's drama, just remember it's all Danabo's fault. That's all I have to say.
Hey, all right, cool, okay.
All right, I'm going to throw it to Roserist.
Yeah, my name is Roserist. Progressive politics. I am currently based in Sweden. Content creation. I have a YouTube account. Roserist upload every day except for Sundays. I stream Sundays and I stream 2 other days during the week as well. But you get both the stream and the upload there, so very efficient. Yeah, during this panel, I suppose, key thing that I just wanted to illustrate that hey, okay, it's possible to be economically literate, to like economics, to understand markets, and be a leftist. Just to add to 2 more things that that, like progressive economic positions. I had to just make sure nobody here walks away with the idea that I'm right wing. I'm also greatly in favor of like generally wealth redistribution programs and just generally progressive economics and taxation as a whole. And I promise you, if I can do this as a 17-year-old, you too, leftists, can be economic literate and be able to argue for these positions in a much more effective way than completely shutting down all notions of economics and trying to just like steamroll ahead with just social politics or just telling the state to do everything. So yeah, you can find me almost everywhere at Roserist. I would recommend the YouTube. That's where I post most of my stuff. That's where you can get most information about, the stuff I put out and the things I think and the stuff I research about. So yeah, thank you very much for having me on, Mr. Geck, and I look forward to being on more hippy dippy stuff in the future.
Hell yeah, anytime.
I have to ask, did you say you're 17?
I did say I was 17.
We have another Polar's World, ladies and gentlemen. All right.
Listen, go ahead.
Sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm amazed at some of the awesome 17, 18-year-olds that come on this platform. And so, yeah, like, more power to you, dude. You know more of the stuff than people that are 25 on this platform. So, yeah, I've got to like heap and praise onto you now.
Thank you.
True. I am amazed by the number of people who are super young, already involved in politics, or already interested, like 15, 17, like Polar's World. We had Thinking Zoomer recently who was 15 and who's based as fuck. So yeah, next generation, already like kudos. Anyway, let's continue with that. One last comment. I was wondering where I saw your takes, Rose. And I just remember I edited a video. You were on a panel with Dylan recently on Prime Camp.
White panel?
Yes.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, I mean, for those of you who are curious, what could possibly be contained in a panel titled the All White Panel? YouTube, Rose Wrist, go there. It's the most recent upload. It's exciting. Destiny's on there, Dylan's on there, Counterpoints is on there. Interesting stuff.
Oh yeah. I'm going to throw it to Habeas.
Thank you. I just want to say I am shocked and appalled that there was a minor on this panel. I didn't know, and I would have pulled back my language. I wouldn't have used swear words.
Wow, the ageism comes in right at the end. No.
Oh man.
I don't want to be sued or thrown in jail. We are Puritans in this country.
Is that a thing? Like if you swear to an underage person?
No.
No. Okay, good. Just check. All right.
I wouldn't put it past
That would be spooky.
All right. Habeas, go ahead.
I want to briefly just say on the capitalism stuff, and I would be delighted to either host or go on anyone else's show if you want to talk about this stuff more. I think that it's very clear capitalism not working as a system hasn't even done much to reduce poverty in the world if you look at the true statistics. And if you're someone who it's working for, then that's great. But that doesn't mean, like, you have to evaluate the whole system. Okay, how many people are starving to death? How many people are dying of preventable disease? How many people don't have, like, a house with electricity and running water? Unless it's working for everybody, it's not working. So that's my point of view on that. I do believe in competition. However, I do not believe in the current system of rewards and penalties. I don't believe in becoming an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos if you win, and I don't believe in dying of starvation if you lose. Aside from that, just thank you so much, Danabo and Mr. Geek, for having me. Thank you, everybody who is on the panel. Thank you for all your wonderful thoughts. And thank you to the audience, the chat. It's been great talking with you all. Oh, and I will just put all my links up in a wee second. And that's all. Thank you.
Yeah. And yeah, speaking of Danabo, charleshockcbd.com, enter code Danabo, 10% off. CBD is amazing if you have trouble sleeping, if you're stressed and everything. So yeah, I'm going to throw it to SDA.
Hey everybody, I'm SDA or Shaved Dog's Ass. Don't worry about the name. I'm generally a pretty friendly and chill guy. I'm here coming onto these panels to just learn a lot more. It's a lot of fun just talking, debating, and discussing ideas. I generally fall along the lines of minarchist or anarcho-capitalist like leanings and think that markets are incredibly powerful tools. I think guns are pretty based. They're a lot of fun, but when it comes to policy, my most important things are here in the US are ending the drug war and criminal justice reform, investment into community tested initiatives, and broader access to healthcare services. I think that we have possibly a beautiful, bright, and vibrant future ahead of us. We just have to find what's going to drive that kind of innovation and change. If you like just chilling and discussing things or like surface level discussions, you can come in and we can start something. Always have call-ins, always have just kind of doing whatever. I'm not streaming as much as I used to because I've got to really focus on life and get some independent living skills going. But if you like React and if you just want to give me something to react to or like watching Mordhau, like just come chill out. Thanks a lot for having me on the panel. It's nice to see the faces I've seen before and nice to meet the new ones. I wish you all a nice evening. Mr. Geek, you're muted.
That was a test to see who was following. SDA, big friend of the channel, always happy to have you on. So yeah, thank you for being here. Before throwing it to North Countryman, I just want to say stay tuned. I'm going to be live for a little more, for a little while, and after that we're right into Bings, who is going to start Super Sunday, which starts at 7, if I remember correctly. So yeah, stay tuned. North Countryman, go ahead.
Yes, I am North Countryman. Twitch.tv/North Countryman is pretty much the only place where I do anything. My Twitter's not really a whole thing. I started doing this honestly because I saw a lot of, not this panel, but other panels where there's a lot of political and economic illiteracy. And I'm very happy that everyone on this panel really knew what they were talking about. And I'm seeing the quality of Twitch politics increasing quite a lot, and I'm happy about that. On the topic of robots, it's not really surprising that a lot of us agree, since I think most of us probably have bots in our chats. So, of course, we're pro-robot. Did I have anything else? I would appreciate, following my stuff, which is usually Politics 101. Definitely check out the Tiberius's stuff, especially his Mask Off podcast. Because I would not be here for panels if it weren't for counterpoints pointing me in the right direction to how to get recruited on these. And also Samantha Banana was on the first panel that I was on, and she told me I had the charisma of a fucking snail, which is correct. It's correct. And I now have a political cartoon from Thomas Nast of Uncle Sam riding a snail on my overlay, and I love it. So definitely go support them. They are good people.
Appreciate it, buddy. I'll let them know.
Did you tell people where they can find you and everything?
Twitch.tv/North Countryman.
Oh yeah.
It's North with a 0 because the O was taken.
And yeah, and with that being said, I think that concludes our show. Thank you everyone for being here. And yeah.
All right, let's have bacon and eggs.
No. Okay.
No.
Now that this is over, let's talk.
We've been waiting all stream for you now. Hit us with your takes.
Okay, first of all,
Go.
crepes. Like, I've seen so many panels and shit like this about like pancakes or waffle. Crepes is the only correct take.
Oh, crepes. Okay. Yeah.
You can do whatever you want. You can put stuff in it. You can put stuff in
That's
the
true.
paste. You can like do everything. It's much better
And they're
than
not too
pancakes.
thick. They're not as thick as the pancake either, so you don't go away feeling like all, like sluggish and everything. Yeah, crepes are pretty good. I can agree with this.
Oh yeah, that's the only take that's valid.
All right, fair
And
enough.
also, okay, now to drop the stuff and lose all of my audience. When you were asking about eggs and stuff like that, who eat eggs with like the yolk, not like fried or anything?
Yeah.
I fucking do, with the salt, pepper, and vinegar. Go ahead, go try before you diss it.
I have tried. That's how I know that it's literally impossible to fucking eat. You take it in a sandwich all over your hand. You open on the plate, all over the plate.
With
Um,
bread.
Sponge it up. with
Yeah,
the
but
sauce.
like it's
everything.
like I'm trying to eat. I'm not trying to like draw in the egg yolk with my bread. You know, I'm just trying to have a simple
Semantics.
meal.
Semantics.
I mean, yeah. If we're talking
Mr.
about
Geek?
like if you, yeah, go ahead. I don't know.
Would I get banned? Would I get banned if I asked you, a Frenchman, your opinion about snails?
It's gross. I don't know. Like, yeah. That's really something. I mean, yeah, that's not something really common in France unless you go into really like high cuisine. But like other than that, yeah, I haven't seen like restaurants having this shit like commonly.
It was low hanging fruit. I had to do it. I had to do it.
Listen, I always have the right to omelette du fromage, snails, and frogs. So you can hurt me with that shit, you know?
Oh, yo, omelets are awesome.
Almost pretty good.
Get
I
a
have to say,
24
okay. Oh, sorry, go for
Yeah, get a diner that serves breakfast all day and get an omelet in the afternoon. That's like awesome.
Hell yeah.
The question is it a good omelet? Because there's a big difference between just a normal omelet and a good omelet.
Yeah. That's
Like,
true
oh,
of most food.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Because it's just like, hey, can I get an omelet? And they're like, oh, okay, it's just a slab of.
Pizza's always
like,
pretty decent.
that's something I'm definitely doing. It's like if it's not deep dish, it's not real pizza. We're gonna put that down as the baseline.
Thin
Yeah,
crust way better.
this was
Wow.
the last time we had Tiberius on the show. After this take, like this is over, cancelled.
Oh no.
This is going to be my new vetting process for shows now. Food takes.
asking their fruit takes. Yeah, fair enough.
I don't know if that's good content.
Mm.
What, by the way, like I can totally forgive the Europeans on this one, but my fellow Americans on the panel here, like, what the hell is wrong with you if you don't like deep dish pizzas? Like, what did you do wrong?
Ask my
Dish
therapist.
pizzas.
I don't
What the
know.
hell?
Fair enough.
Deep dish pizzas. What are these?
I
It's,
support all pizza.
Fat
Don't look it up, Rose.
Why
at
would you
some
make the
point, it
pizza
just
into
becomes a
Why would you make
breadstick
it
with
into a
sauce on
pie?
top.
Why would you make it into a pie? Why would you do this? This is a bastardization of the pizza. This is
I'm a
terrible.
foodie. I would eat all these things that you're describing,
Holy
including
shit.
a breadstick with sauce on it.
What is this? This is terrible. Oh my god.
It's close to pizza. I'm in.
Hey, look, there is
Ew.
It's
hey, look,
copyright at all.
Ew.
in my defense, there is a reason why the United States sets the record for obesity.
Yeah, holy shit. What the fuck is this?
But in all fairness, don't knock it till you try it. It's delicious. You're only gonna eat one piece, but it's
on
delicious.
principle, I refuse to ever even put
Hey,
anything.
wait, your own
near
trash
my mouth.
aren't principled. Hell, you guys would pay for your own defense if you guys were.
Oh my god. Well, we don't need a defense, okay? Because we got strong fucking trade. Nobody wants to fuck with us, okay? Because then our economy gets fucked, okay?
You got
That's how it is. That's
dad-
a true globalist plan, all right?
Oh, whatever. You got
Don't need
Daddy
a
America
military.
playing for your defense.
Sweden isn't even in NATO. What do you mean?
True, but everyone else around you is.
Yeah, well, too bad. You don't have any control over us. We're kind
called
of chilling
kiting.
here, you know?
It's called
Yeah, well,
kiting.
if it works, it works, okay? If it works, it works.
Yeah.
Mom,
you guys
Dad,
get-
the panel's over. Stop arguing.
When you guys get
No, like you more.
This is when the real debate happens after
Yeah,
the stream ends. That's when,
That's no
that's when
lie.
the real opinions come out.
That is no lie. By the way, when do you guys get nukes? When do you guys join the nuclear club?
I don't know why we would spend millions of dollars developing nuclear technology when we can spend that creating growth for our population.
No, fair enough.
So, like, you know.
Because nukes are pretty cool, man.
Well, when's the next time you guys are getting a functioning healthcare system?
God damn. Okay.
All right. I gotta get some breakfast to me. I'll see you later.
You have a good one, Sourcing.
I'm gonna go get some sleep, and I'm sure. Do I say Miss? Is it Mr. Geek or Mr. Geek?
Mr. Geek. I just removed
Okay,
the
you just forgot an
two.
E.
No, I just removed the two as a joke.
Oh, I see.
But yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm sure I'm gonna go to sleep, and I'm sure Mr. Geek
Bye.
might do the same. So goodbye, everybody.
You have a good one. And thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Geek, you haven't rated her yet.
No. No. I'm still live. I'm going to stay live until being so.
Oh, okay. I gotcha.
Yeah.
SDA, how are you, sir?
I am doing. That is going to be my answer for quite a long time. I've had to face realities that I haven't wanted to face, and you need to develop independent living skills. So I've been not focused on my computer, and I'm going to be going into I'm going to be going into a recovery program here in the next month. That's going to like really change what I'm doing. So I might not have enough time to stream or interact with people, but it's a good like I'm not doing anything right now, so it's a good makes me feel like I'm doing at least something. It gives me something to do.
Yeah, I 100% get that. Just as two things, and this is more for the audience as well. But if you need anything, definitely feel free to reach out to me, dude. You seem pretty kosher, pretty cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if like you just get a chance to fire up Discord, you need to talk, just reach out. I'll definitely help you. If I can address your audience for just a second, Geek. No,
Sure.
I've been talking to people like all weekend. And it's just like everyone I talk to is just like going through the ringer right now. Like there's things going on in their lives. Like everyone that I've talked to, or almost everyone I've talked to, that whether they're stable or like pillars of the community or people that sit in the background, is that a lot of people seem to be having a lot of trouble right now. So I'm just going to encourage you guys. Look, if you're having issues, if you need somebody, reach out. It doesn't have to be me. My inbox is open. Anyone can message it as long as I'm in like the same server as you. But yeah. If you need to reach out to me, go for it. If you have somebody you like more, whether it's a lefty or some other person, you don't like me, I am an asshole. Yeah, feel free to reach out because you're not alone and you don't have to be alone. This is the beauty of the internet. So.
Yep.
Yeah.
100% agree.
You don't have to that's one thing a lot of people kind of adopted. I don't know. I've been watching J-Reg's videos again on mental illnesses, and it's like, you're not an introvert. You're just not healthily dealing with your actual issues. You're just not going out and socializing. So I've found that the more I'm honest and open, and the more I reach up for help, that there's more hands reaching down to pull me out of how I'm feeling, and that being alone in your room is really hard to do sometimes.
Oh, I love it. I wish I didn't have to leave sometimes, but on the other side is I'm an extrovert, right? So I can talk to people on panel, or I can talk to people in IRL, and I can get largely what I want out of it. The problem I have with IRL is that my community is a community of 15,000 people. It's like Trump country, and I don't like a lot of the folks here. They're very insular. They're not very open-minded, and it sucks. And so I'm actually looking into moving here in the next year to kind of change up my scenery. On the other side, the problem I have with online is I find a lot of people that I actually like to talk to a lot more. Like there's a lot more outgoing people. There's a lot more people that are interested in politics and things of that like. But I can't give you a bro hug, right? I can't reach out and touch you just like, hey man, it's gonna be all right. Here's a little bro hug, that kind of shit. Like that physical, personal connection gone, and that does hurt the soul a little bit.
Being face to face is incredibly important, but it's not often. It's hard to get past that barrier sometimes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm gonna head off and just go play some video games by myself. Boo. But it was really nice being on the panel again. And, Mr. Geek, if you ever need another righty to be bullied, I'm here.
Yeah, same. If you want someone to play Pavlov or Contagion with, you know where to find me.
All right. I'll see you later.
Take care.
And then there were two.
Yeah.
Well, if you got anything that you want to throw at me, feel free to. But other than that, I'll probably sign off. I've been working on graphics work.
Nice. What are you working on? What kind of graphics?
I'm updating the graphics for my Mask Off show and whatnot. Sam was doing it. She does great work, but she's busy doing all these other things. And so Taze and Sam, which Taze is the guy who does Connor stuff, has been helping me kind of build up some skills. And it's not A grade by any imagination, but give me a second here. I'll send you a few of the last things that I made.
To be honest, you don't need A grade stuff. Basically, you don't need to have the latest graphics or anything. You can with a few tutorials that you can find online, you can do some some really cool shit.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. It's just how you. It's not that it has to be spectacular. It's that it's amazing, like what I started out with, which was very, very basic stuff that people are like, oh, that's not really exciting. That's not really interesting. Where you kind of realize how to like balance the frames. Because like as an example of what I sent you, and if you want to post that up on on the thing so people know what we're talking about, that's cool. I tried the 6-person panel in columns, right? Like right next to each other. But it's like literally everyone's face is pressed in like this. And it's like, all right, that doesn't look very well. And I'm like, all right, cool. Let's try this up a little bit. Let's make it wide, top down panels. And it actually worked really, really well. So I'm quite happy for that. It is just kind of mixing and matching to see what actually works. And I'm getting better at it. I'm not perfect, but I'm liking it. So,
Yeah, honestly, it's really good. This is the same advice that I give to everyone when it comes to graphics. Oh shit! Just realized it's not the right screen. Which is like just to be consistent. Basically, that's all you need. If you keep the same font, the same ideal, the same colors and everything, you do like 90% of the job right. The rest 10% you can do without. So yeah, you seem to be respecting that. So yeah, honestly, good job.
I appreciate it, man. Anyway, I think this is going to be the end for me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And if you need me or to fill in a spot elsewhere, just reach out. I'm not going to guarantee that I'm going to be there, but you can do that. But I am really enjoying the recruitment panels. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I've been trying to get more chill. I think that there is enough panel, with fighting people in it. So yeah, having one that is chill. But yeah. Also, yeah, if you want to, yeah, I will transmit your message to Danabo, who is in chat right now. But yeah, like he's in charge of the booking. I don't do that anymore.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Just reach out to Danabo. I noticed he was deafened. So, yeah, that's going to be it for me. Thank you all very much for having me. Appreciate it. And then I'll catch you all later.
Take care.